The Poem of the Man God, Volume 1, Chapter 16, The Annunciation, 8th of March, 1944. What I see, Mary, a very young girl. She looks 15 years old at most. She's in a small rectangular room, a room most suitable for a girl. Along one of the longer walls there is a bed, a low bed, without bedstead, covered with thick mats or carpets, which appear to be laid on boards or cane trellis, because they are very stiff and without any curve, as is usual with our beds. Against the other wall there is a kind of a bookcase with an oil lamp, some rolls of parchment, some needlework carefully folded. It seems to be embroidery work. Beside the bookcase, toward the door, which opens onto the kitchen garden, and which is now covered by a curtain gently moved by a light breeze, there is the Virgin, sitting on a low stool. She is spinning some linen which is as white as snow and as soft as silk. Her little hands, just a little darker than linen, are whirling the spindle very quickly. Her beautiful young face is slightly bent forward, and she is smiling gently, as if she were caressing or following some sweet thought. There is a great silence in the little house and in the kitchen garden. There is a great peace both on Mary's face and in the surrounding place. There is peace and order. Everything is neat and tidy in the room, although very modest looking and very modestly furnished. It is almost as bare as a cell, has something austere and regal about it, because of its cleanliness and the care with which everything is laid. The clothes on the bed, the rolls, the lamp, the copper pitcher near the lamp, with a bunch of branches in bloom in it. I do not know whether they are peach or pear branches. They are certainly branches of a fruit tree with pinkish white flowers. Mary begins to sing in a low voice. Then she raises her voice slightly, but she does not sing loudly. Still, it is a voice vibrating in the little room, and one can perceive the vibration of her soul in it. I do not understand the words as they are spoken in Hebrew, but as now and again she repeats Jehovah, I realize that it is a sacred song, perhaps a psalm. Mary is probably remembering the songs of the temple, and it must be a happy memory because she lays her hands in her lap while still holding the yarn and the spindle, and lifts her head leaning against the wall. Her face is beautifully flushed, and her eyes are lost behind. I wonder what sweet thoughts. Her eyes are shining with tears, which appear but do not overflow, and they make her eyes look larger. And yet those eyes are smiling. They are smiling at a thought they can see and by which Mary is abstracted from the earthly world. Mary's face, flushed and girded by the plaits she wears rolled up like a crown round her head, seems a beautiful flower as it emerges from her plain white dress. The song changes into a prayer. Most High Lord God, do not delay any longer in sending your servant to bring peace to the world. Grant us the favorable time and the pure and prolific Virgin for the coming of your Christ. Father, Holy Father, grant me, your servant, to offer my life for this purpose. Grant me to die after seeing your light and your justice on earth, and after knowing that our redemption has been accomplished. O Holy Father, send the promise of the prophets to the earth. Send the Redeemer to your maidservant, so that in the hour of my death your abode may be opened to me, as its gates have already been opened by your Christ, for all those who have hoped in you. Come, come, O Spirit of the Lord. Come to the faithful who are expecting you. Come, Prince of Peace. Mary remains absorbed thus. The curtain moves fast, as if someone behind it ventilated it or shook it to draw it, and the pearl-white light mixed with pure silver, makes the slightly yellow walls clearer and makes the colour of the cloths brighter, and Mary's raised face more spiritual. And in such light, while the curtain is still drawn on the mystery to be accomplished, the archangel prostrates himself. The curtain no longer moves. It is hanging stiff against the doorpost like a wall separating the inside from the outside. The angel must necessarily take a human appearance, but it is transhumanized appearance. Of what flesh is this beautiful and gleaming figure made? With what substance did God form it to make it perceptible to the senses of the Virgin? Only God can possess such substances and use them so perfectly. It is a face, a body, eyes, a mouth, hair, and hands like ours, but they are not our dull matter. It is a light that has taken the colour of flesh, of eyes, hair, lips, a light that moves and smiles, looks and speaks. Hail Mary, full of grace, hail. The voice is a sweet arpeggio as of pearls thrown on a precious metal plate. Mary is startled and lowers her head, and she is even more startled when she sees the shining creature kneeling at about a meter from her and looking at her with infinite veneration, his hands crossed over his chest. Mary jumps to her feet and she squeezes against the wall. She turns pale and red alternately. Her face shows surprise and fear. She subconsciously presses her hands against her breast, hiding them under her large sleeves. She stoops, endeavouring to conceal her body as much as possible, an attitude of gentle modesty. No, do not fear. The Lord is with you. You are blessed amongst all women. But Mary continues to be afraid. Where has that extraordinary being come from? Is he a messenger of God or of the deceiver? Do not fear, Mary, repeats the archangel. I am Gabriel, the angel of God. My Lord has sent me to you. Do not be afraid, because you have found grace in the eyes of God. And you will conceive and bear a son, and you will call him Jesus. He will be great and will be called Son of the Most High. And such he really will be. And the Lord God will give him the throne of his ancestor David, and he will rule over the house of Jacob forever, and his reign will have no end. Understand, O Holy Virgin, loved by God, daughter blessed by him, called to be the mother of his Son. What son you will generate. How can this come about, since I do not know a man? Perhaps the Lord God will no longer accept the offer of his maidservant, and does not want me a virgin for his love. Not by deed of man you will be a mother, Mary. You are the eternal Virgin, the Holy Virgin of God. The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will cover you with its shadow. So the child born of you will be called Holy and Son of God. Our Lord God can do everything. Elizabeth, the barren one, in her old age has conceived a son who will be the prophet of your Son and will prepare his ways. The Lord has removed her disgrace, and her memory will remain amongst peoples, together with your name, as the name of her creature will be joined to the name of your Holy Son. And until the end of centuries, you will be called blessed, because of the grace of the Lord which has come to you, both and particularly to you, by means of whom grace has come to all peoples. Elizabeth is in her 6th month, and her burden lifts her to joy, and will lift her even more when she hears of your joy. Nothing is impossible to the Lord, Mary, full of grace. What shall I tell my Lord? Let no thought whatsoever disturb you. He will protect your interests if you trust in him. The world, heaven, the eternal Father are awaiting your word. Mary crosses her hands over her breast and bowing down deeply, she says, I am the handmaid of the Lord. Let what you have said be done to me. The angel shines out of joy. He kneels in adoration because he certainly sees the Spirit of God descend upon the Virgin, bent down in assent, and he disappears without moving the curtain, but leaves it well drawn over the holy mystery. The Poem of the Man God, Volume 1, Chapter 17, The Disobedience of Eve and the Obedience of Mary. 5th of March, 1944. Jesus says, Do we not read in Genesis that God made the man the overlord of everything on the earth, that is, everything except God and his angelical ministers? Do we not read that he made the woman the companion of man in his joy, and his dominion over all living beings? Do we not read that they were allowed to eat of everything, with the exception of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Why? What is the meaning of the words, that he might rule? And what is the meaning of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Have you ever asked these questions, you man, who ask so many useless ones and never ask your soul about heavenly truths? Your soul would tell you, if it were alive, because a soul in grace is held like a flower in the hands of your angel, and like a flower it is kissed by the sun and sprinkled with dew by the Holy Spirit, who warms and illuminates it, sprays and decorates it with heavenly lights. How many truths your soul would tell you if you only knew how to converse with it, if you loved your soul that makes you like God, who is a spirit, as your soul is a spirit. What a great friend you would have if you loved your soul instead of hating it to the extent of killing it. What a great and sublime friend with whom you could talk of celestial matters. Since you men are so eager to talk, and you ruin one another with friendships, which, if they are not unworthy ones, as sometimes they are almost always useless, and they turn into a vain and damaging tumult of worldly words. Did I not say, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we shall come to him and make our home with him? The soul in grace possesses love, and by possessing love, it possesses God. That is the Father who preserves it, the Son who teaches it, the Spirit who illuminates it. It therefore possesses knowledge, science, wisdom, and light. Consider therefore what sublime conversations your soul could hold with you. Such conversations filled the silence of prisons, the silence of cells, the silence of hermitages, the silence of the rooms of holy sick people. Such conversations were the consolation of prisoners awaiting martyrdom, of cloistered monks and nuns searching for the truth, of hermits longing for an advanced knowledge of God, of sick people in bearing, nay, in loving their crosses. If you knew how to question your soul, you would be told that the true, extensive meaning, as comprehensive as creation itself, of the words that he might rule is this: that man might dominate everything, that is his three states, the lower state, the animal one, the middle state, the moral one, the superior state, the spiritual one. And all three of them are to be directed to one sole aim: to possess God, to possess him by deserving him through a strict control which subdues all the power of one's ego and conveys it to one only purpose: to deserve to possess God. Your soul would tell you that God had forbidden the knowledge of good and evil because he had already granted good to his creatures gratuitously, and he did not want you to know evil, because it is a sweet fruit to taste, but once its juice becomes part of your blood, it causes a fever that kills you and produces a parching thirst, so that the more one drinks of that false juice, the more thirsty one becomes. You may object, and why did he put it there? Because evil is a force that originated by itself, like certain monstrous diseases in the most wholesome body. Lucifer was an angel, the most beautiful of all the angels, a perfect spirit, inferior only to God, and yet in his bright essence a vapor of pride arose, and he did not scatter it. On the contrary, he condensed it by brooding over it, and evil was born of this incubation. It existed before man. God had hurled him out of paradise, and cursed incubator of evil who had desecrated paradise. But he is the internal incubator of evil, and as he can no longer soil paradise, he has soiled the earth. The metaphorical tree proves this truth. God had said to the man and the woman, "You know all the laws and the mysteries of creation, but do not infringe on my right of being the creator of man. My love will suffice for the propagation of the human race, and it will spread among you and will excite the new Adams of the race without any lust of the senses, but with purely charitable pulsations. I have given you everything. I am only keeping for myself this mystery of the formation of man." Satan wanted to deprive man of this intellectual virginity, and with his venomous tongue, he blandished and caressed Eve's limbs and eyes, exciting reflections and a perspicacity which they did not have before, because malice had not yet intoxicated them. She saw, and seeing, she wanted to try. Her flesh was aroused. Oh, if she had called to God, if she had hurried to him saying, "Father, the serpent had caressed me and I am upset," the Father would have purified and healed her with his breath, which could have infused new innocence into her as it had infused life, and it would have made her forget the snake's poison. Nay, it would have engendered in her a disgust for the serpent, as it happens in those who bear an instinctive dislike for diseases of which they have just been cured. But Eve does not go to the Father. Eve goes back to the serpent. The sensation is a sweet one for her. Seeing that the fruit of the tree was good to eat and pleasing and agreeable to the eye, she took it and ate it. And she understood. Now malice was inside her and was gnawing at her intestines. She saw with new eyes and heard with new ears the habits and voices of beasts, and she craved for them with insane greed. She began the sin by herself. She accomplished it with her companion. That is why a heavier sentence is laid on woman. Because of her, man has become rebellious towards God, and has become acquainted with lewdness and death. Because of her, he was no longer capable of dominating his three reigns. The reign of the Spirit, because he allowed the Spirit to disobey God. The moral reign, because he allowed passions to master him. The reign of the flesh, because he lowered it down to the instinctive level of beasts. The serpent seduced me, says Eve. The woman offered me the fruit, and I ate of it, says Adam. and the triple greed has ruled the three dominions since then. Only grace can relax the hold of this ruthless monster. And if grace is alive, nay, thoroughly alive, and kept more and more alive by the goodwill of a faithful Son, it will succeed in strangling the monster and will no longer have anything to fear. It will not be afraid of internal tyrants, which are the flesh and passions. Neither will it be afraid of external tyrants. These are the world and the mighty ones on the earth. It will dread neither persecutions nor death. It is as Paul the Apostle says, I fear none of these things, neither do I care for my life more than I care for myself, provided I carry out the mission and the ministry the Lord Jesus gave me. And that was to bear witness to the good news of God's grace. 8th of March, 1944. Mary says, I obeyed in my joy, because when I understood the mission to which God called me, I was full of joy. My heart opened like a closed lily, and it shed that blood which was to become the soil for the Lord's seed. The joy of being a mother. I had consecrated myself to God since my childhood, because the light of the Most High had shown me the cause of evil in the world, and as far as it was in my power, I wanted to remove from myself every trace of Satan. I did not know I was without stain. I could not think I was. That simple thought would have been presumption and pride, because since I was born of human parents, it was not right for me to think that I was the chosen one to be the faultless one. The Spirit of God had informed me of the pain of the Father because of the corruption of Eve, who had lowered herself to the level of inferior creatures, whereas she was a creature of grace. It was my intention to soothe that pain by remaining unprofaned by human thoughts, wishes, and contacts, and thus restoring an angelical purity in my body. The palpitations of my heart were to be only for him, and only for him my whole being. But if there was no passion of the flesh in me, there was still the sacrifice of not being a mother. Also, Eve had been granted by the Father Creator the gift of maternity, a maternity devoid of what now degrades it, the sweet and pure maternity without a sensual burden. I experienced it. Of how much did Eve divest herself by giving up such wealth? More than immortality. And do not think that I am exaggerating. My Jesus and I, his mother, with him, have experienced the languor of death. I, the sweet languor of a tired person who falls asleep. Jesus, the intense languor of who dies sentenced to death. So we also experienced death. But only I, the new Eve, experienced maternity without any kind of profanation, that I might tell the world how sweet was the destiny of woman called to be a mother without any bodily pain. And the desire of such pure maternity was possible and actually existed in the virgin wholly devoted to God, because that maternity is the glory of woman. If you consider in what high esteem the Israelites held a mother, you will realize even more what sacrifice I had made when I consecrated myself to virginity. Now the eternal good Father granted me, his servant, this gift, without divesting me of the purity I had clothed myself in to be a flower of his throne. And I rejoiced with the double joy of being the mother of a man and the mother of God. The joy of being the woman by means of whom peace was re-established between heaven and earth. Oh, what a joy to have desired this peace for the sake of God and of men, and to know that it was coming to the world through me, the poor handmaid of the Almighty. What a joy to say, "Men, do not cry any longer. I have in me the secret that will make you happy. I cannot tell what it is because it is sealed in me, in my heart, just as the sun is enclosed in my inviolate womb. But I am already bringing it to you, and the moment when you will see him and hear his holy name is getting nearer and nearer. The joy of having made God happy, the joy of the believer, for his God is made happy. Oh, the joy of removing from God's heart the bitterness of Eve's disobedience, pride, and disbelief. My Jesus explained the fault with which the first couple got stained. I redeemed that sin by going up the same stages as they descended. Disobedience was the beginning of the downfall. Do not eat and do not touch of that tree, said God. And man and woman did not respect that prohibition, although as kings of creation they were allowed to touch and eat of everything except of that tree, because God wanted them to be inferior only to angels. The tree, the means to test their obedience. What does obedience to God's commands imply? It implies that all possible good, because God commands nothing but good. What is disobedience? It is evil, because it brings about a rebellious mental state in which Satan can be active. Eve goes toward the tree, which, if avoided, would have caused her welfare, if approached, would cause her ruin. She goes there led by the childish curiosity of seeing what is special about it, and by a rashness that makes her consider God's commands a useless one, since she is strong and pure, the Queen of Eden, where everything is subject to her and nothing can hurt her. Her presumption is her ruin. Presumption is the yeast of pride. At the tree she finds the seducer, who sings his song of lies to her inexperience, to her beautiful virginal inexperience, to her badly guarded inexperience. You think there is evil here. No, there isn't. God told you because he wants to keep you as slaves under his power. You think you are king and queen? You are not even as free as wild animals. Animals can love one another with true love. You cannot. Animals are granted the gift of being creators like God. Animals generate little ones and see their families grow as much as they like. You do not. You are denied this joy. Why make you man and woman if you have to live thus? Be gods. You do not know the joy of being two in one flesh that creates a third one and many more. Do not believe God when he promised you the joy of posterity, seeing your children forming new families, leaving their father and mother for their families. He has given you a sham life. Real life is to know the laws of life. Then you will be like gods and will be able to say to God, "We are equal to you." And the allurement continued because there was no will to break it. On the contrary, there was the will to continue it and to learn what did not belong to man. And the forbidden tree becomes really mortal for the human race, because from its branches there hangs the fruit of bitter knowledge that comes from Satan. And the woman becomes a female, and with the yeast of satanic knowledge in her heart, she moves on to corrupt Adam. With their bodies and souls degraded and their morals corrupted, they became acquainted with sorrow and the death of both their souls, deprived of grace, and of their bodies divested of immorality. And Eve's wound engendered suffering, which will not subside until the last couple on earth are dead. I went along the road of the two sinners, but in the opposite direction. I obeyed. I obeyed in every way. God inspired me to be a virgin. I obeyed. When I loved virginity that made me as pure as the first woman before she met Satan, God asked me to get married. I obeyed, elevating marriage to the degree of purity intended by God when he created the first parents. I was then convinced that my destiny was solitude in marriage, and the contempt of people because of my holy sterility when God asked me to be a mother. I obeyed. I believed that it was possible and that the word came from God, because I was filled with peace when I heard it. I did not think I deserved it. I did not say, "Now the world will admire me because I am like God, creating the flesh of God." No, I did not. I lowered myself in my humility. Joy gushed out of my heart like the stem of a rose, but it was soon decorated with sharp thorns, and it was clenched in the tangle of sorrow. Sorrow for the pain of my spouse. It suffocated my joy. Sorrow for the pain of my son, a thorn that pierced my joy. Eve wanted pleasure, triumph, freedom. I accepted sorrow, humiliation, slavery. I gave up my peaceful life, the esteem of my spouse, my own freedom. I kept nothing for myself. I became the maid of God in the flesh, in morals, in the spirit, relying on him, not only for the virginal conception, but also for the protection of my honor, for the consolation of my spouse, for the means suitable to elevate him, also to the sublimation of marriage, so that we could restore man and woman to their lost dignity. I embraced the will of the Lord for myself, my spouse, and my creature. I said yes for the whole three, as I was certain that God would not break his promise to assist me in my sorrow of a spouse who realizes she is considered guilty, and of a mother who knows she is generating a son to deliver him to sorrow. I said yes and nothing else. That yes cancelled Eve's no to God's command. Yes, my Lord, as you wish. I will know what you want me to know. I will live as you want me to live. I will rejoice if you wish so. I will suffer for what you want me to suffer. Yes, forever, my Lord, from the moment your ray made me a mother to the moment you called me back to you. Yes, forever. Yes. All the good voices of the flesh, all the good passions of the spirit were under the weight of my perpetual yes. And above, on a diamond pedestal, there was my spirit, lacking wings to fly to you. But it was the master of the whole ego subdued and made your servant. Servant in joy, servant in sorrow. But smile, O God, and be happy. Guilt has been defeated. It has been removed and destroyed. It lies under my heel. It was washed in my tears and destroyed by my obedience. The new tree will be born of my bosom, and it will bear the fruit that knows all the evil, because it suffered it all in itself and will give all the good. All men will be able to come to it, and I shall be happy if they take of it, even if they do not remember that it was born of me. Providing man is saved and God is loved, let it be done to his handmaid what is done to a clod of earth on which a tree is planted, a step to ascend. Mary, we must always be steps so that other people may ascend to God. It does not matter if they tread on us, providing they are successful in reaching the cross. It is the new tree that has the knowledge of good and evil, because it tells man what is good and what is evil, so that he may choose and live, and at the same time it is a medicine that cures those who are intoxicated by the evil they wanted to taste. Let our hearts be under the feet of men, that the number of the redeemed may increase, and the blood of my Jesus not be shed fruitlessly. That is the destiny of the maids of God. But then we deserve to receive the Holy Ghost in our hearts, and to say at the foot of the cross, drenched with his blood and our tears, "Here is, O Father, the immaculate host, which we offer to you for the salvation of the world. Look at us, Father, melted with it, and give us your blessing for his infinite merits. And I give you my caresses. Rest now, my daughter dear. The Lord is with you." Jesus says, "My mother's words should disperse all perplexity of thought, also in the minds most confused and muddled by pseudoscience." I said metaphorical tree. Now I will say symbolical tree. Perhaps you will understand better. Its symbol is clear. The inclination to good and to evil of the two children of God would be understood by their behavior toward the tree. Like aqua regia that tests gold and the scales of the goldsmith that weigh its carats, that tree, by God's command, became a means of testing, and it gave the measure of Adam's and Eve's symbolic mental purity. I can already hear your objection. Was the punishment not excessive, and the means used to condemn them not childish? Not so. Actually, disobedience in you, who are their heirs, is not so grave as if it were in them. You have been redeemed by me. But Satan's poison is always ready to rise again, like certain diseases that never disappear completely in the blood. The first parents possessed grace without ever even nearing disgrace. They were therefore stronger and more firmly supported by grace that generated love and innocence. The gift given them by God was infinite. Much graver is therefore, notwithstanding that gift. Also, the fruit that was offered and eaten was symbolical. It was the fruit of an experience they wanted to have at Satan's instigation to break God's command. I had not forbidden men love. I only wanted them to love each other without malice, as I loved them in my holiness. They were to love each other in the holiness of affections, unsoiled by lewdness. It must not be forgotten that grace is light, and whoever possesses it knows what is good and useful to know. Mary, full of grace, knew everything, because wisdom taught her, wisdom that is grace, and she knew how to live in a holy way. Also, Eve knew what was good for her to know, but not more, because it is valueless to know what is not good. But she did not have faith in God's word, and was not faithful to her promise of obedience. She believed in Satan. She broke her promise. She wanted to know what was not good. She loved it without regret. She turned love into something corrupt and degraded, which I instead had permitted as something holy. A sullied angel, she wallowed in mud and litter, whereas she could have run happily amongst the flowers of the earthly paradise, and she could have seen her offspring flourish around her like a plant that is covered with flowers without bending its leaves into the mire. Do not be like the foolish children mentioned by me in the Gospel. They heard other children sing, and they stopped their ears. They heard them play the pipes, and they did not dance. They heard them weep, and they wanted to laugh. Do not be narrow-minded. Do not be deniers. Accept the light without malice and stubbornness, without irony and disbelief. Enough said about that. To make you understand how grateful you must be to him who died to elevate you to heaven and to defeat Satan's concupiscence, I wanted to speak to you in this period of preparation for Easter of what was the first link of the chain by which the word of the Father was dragged to death, the divine Lamb to the slaughterhouse. I wanted to speak to you about it because at present 90% of you are like Eve, intoxicated by Lucifer's breath and words, and you do not live to love one another, but to glut yourselves with sensuality. You do not live for heaven, but for filth. You are no longer creatures gifted with soul and reason, but dogs without soul and without reason. You have killed your souls and perverted your reason. I solemnly tell you that brutes surpass you in the honesty of their love. The Poem of Man God, Volume 1, Chapter 18, The Annunciation of Elizabeth's Pregnancy to Joseph. 25th of March, 1944. The little house of Nazareth appears to me with Mary in it. Mary, a young girl, as when the angel of God appeared to her. This simple sight fills my soul with the virginal perfume of the house. The scent still remains in the room where the angel gently waved his golden wings. That divine perfume was all concentrated on Mary to make a mother of her, and it now emanates from her. It is evening, because shadows begin to invade the room into which so much heavenly light has descended. Mary is kneeling near her little bed and is praying with her arms crossed over her breast, and the face bowed down very low. She is still dressed as she was at the moment of the Annunciation, everything exactly as it was then. The flowery branch is in its vase, the furniture in the same position, only the distaff and the spindle are now leaning in a corner, the former with its flax, the latter with its bright thread wrapped around it. Mary stops praying and stands up. Her face is flushed as if it were lit up by a flame. Her lips are smiling, but her eyes are shining with tears. She takes the oil lamp and lights it with a flint. She checks that everything is in good order in the room. She straightens up the blanket on the bed as it had been displaced. She adds some water to the vase containing the flowery branch, and she places it outside in the cool of the night. She then comes back in. She takes the folded embroidery from the bookcase and the lamp and goes out, closing the door. She takes a few steps in the little kitchen garden, along the side of the house, and then goes into the little room where I saw the parting goodbye of Jesus and Mary. I recognize it, although some pieces of furniture which were there previously are now missing. Mary disappears into another small adjoining room, taking the lamp with her, and I am left alone in the company of the embroidery work laid on the corner of the table. I can hear Mary's light steps moving to and fro. She then makes a noise with water as if she were washing something. Then there is the noise of broken sticks, and I understand that she is lighting the fire. Then she comes back and goes into the little garden. She comes in once again with some apples and vegetables. She puts the apples on the table, on an engraved metal tray, possibly made of copper. She goes back into the kitchen, for the kitchen is certainly over there. Now the flames of the fireplace are merrily casting light through the open door into this room and making dancing shadows on the wall. Some time goes by, and Mary comes in with a small brown loaf and a bowl of hot milk. She sits down and dips some small slices of bread into the milk. She eats them slowly. Then, leaving half of the bowl of milk, she goes into the kitchen and comes back with the vegetables, on which she pours some oil, and she eats them with the bread. She quenches her thirst with the milk. She then takes an apple and eats it, the meal of the little girl. Mary eats and thinks, and she smiles at some inner thought. She looks up and all around the walls and seems to be telling them a secret. Now and again she becomes serious, almost sad. But soon her smile is back on her lips again. There is a knocking at the door. Mary gets up and opens it. Joseph comes in. They greet each other. Then Joseph sits on a stool in front of Mary, on the opposite side of the table. Joseph is a handsome man in the prime of life. He must be 35 years old at most. His face is framed with his dark brown hair and a beard of the same color, and his eyes are very sweet and very dark, almost black. His forehead is large and smooth, his nose thin and slightly aquiline. His cheeks are roundish, of a brown hue, but not olive-colored. On the contrary, they are rosy near the cheekbones. He is not very tall, but he is strong and well built. Before sitting down, he has taken off his mantle, and it is the first I have seen of its kind, because it is a full circle. It is held close at the neck by a kind of hook, and it has a hood. The color is light brown, and it seems to be made of a cloth of coarse wool, proof against water. It looks like the mantle of a mountaineer, suitable to shelter from inclement weather. Also, before sitting down, he offers Mary 2 eggs and a bunch of grapes, somewhat withered, but well preserved, and he smiles, saying, "The grapes were brought to me from Cana. I was given the eggs by a centurion for some repair work I did to his cart. A wheel was broken, and the carpenter is ill. They are new laid. He took them from the hen house. Drink them, they will do you good." "Tomorrow, Joseph, I have just finished my meal." "But you can take the grapes, they are good, as sweet as honey. I carried them very carefully, so that they would not get spoiled. Eat them, there are plenty more. I'll bring them tomorrow in a little basket. I couldn't this evening, because I came straight from the centurion's house." "Well then, you have not had any supper yet." "No, I haven't, but it does not matter." Mary gets up at once and goes into the kitchen, and she comes back with some milk, some olives, and cheese. "I have nothing else," she says. "Take an egg." But Joseph does not want it. The eggs are for Mary. He eats with relish his bread and the cheese, and he drinks the lukewarm milk. He then accepts an apple, and his supper is over. Mary takes the embroidery after cleaning the table, and Joseph helps her, and he remains in the kitchen even when she comes back here. I can hear him putting things away. He pokes the fire because it is a cool evening. When he comes in, Mary thanks him. They speak to each other. Joseph tells her how he spent the day. He talks of his little nephews, and he has an interest in Mary's work and her flowers. He promises to bring her some beautiful flowers which the centurion has promised him. They are flowers we haven't got here. They were brought from Rome, and he promised me some little plants. Now when the moon is in the right quarter, I will plant them for you. They have lovely colors and a beautiful scent. I saw them last year because they bloom in summer. They will scent the whole house for you. Then I will prune the trees when the moon is right. It is time." Mary smiles and thanks him. Then there is silence. Joseph looks at Mary's fair head bowed over her embroidery, a look of angelical love. Certainly, if an angel were to love a woman with the love of a husband, he would look at her thus. Then Mary, as if she were taking a sudden decision, lays the embroidery on her laps and says, "I also have something to tell you. I never have anything to say, because you know how retired I live. But today I have some news. I heard that our relative Elizabeth, Zacharias' wife, is about to have a child." Joseph opens his eyes wide and exclaims, "At her age?" "At her age," replies Mary, smiling. "The Lord can do everything, and now he is giving this joy to our relative." "How do you know? Is the news certain?" "A messenger came, one who would not tell lies. I would like to go to Elizabeth's to help her, and tell her that I am rejoicing with her, if you will allow me." "Mary, you are my lady and I your servant. Whatever you do is well done. When would you like to go?" "As soon as possible, but I shall be away for some months." "And I will count the days waiting for you. Go, and don't worry. I will look after the house and your little garden. You will find the flowers as beautiful as if you had taken care of them. Only, wait. Before Passover, I must go to Jerusalem to buy certain things for my work. If you can wait for a few days, I will come with you as far as Jerusalem. I can't go any further, because I must hurry back. But we can go there together. I will be happier if I know that you are not on the road by yourself. When you want to come back, you can let me know and I will come and meet you." "You are so good, Joseph. May the Lord reward you with his blessings and keep sorrow away from you. I always pray him for that." The chaste couple smile at each other angelically. There is silence again for a little while. Then Joseph gets up. He puts his mantle on, and he covers his head with the hood. He says goodbye to Mary, who has also got up, and he goes out. Mary looks at him going out, and she sighs rather sadly. She then lifts her eyes to heavens. She's certainly praying. She closes the door carefully. She folds the embroidery. She goes into the kitchen, puts out or covers up the fire. She makes sure that everything is in order. She then takes the oil lamp and goes out, closing the door. With her hand, she shields the feeble flame that flickers in the cool evening breeze. She enters her room and prays once again. The vision ends thus. Mary says, "My dear daughter, when I came back to the reality of earthly life after the ecstasy that had filled me with inexpressible joy, my first thought was for Joseph. A thought as sharp as a rose thorn that pierced my heart, enraptured among the roses of divine love, who had become my spouse only a few moments before. By this time I loved my holy and provident guardian. Since the time when by the will of God manifested to me by the word of the priest, I had become married to Joseph, I had the possibility of knowing and appreciating the holiness of that just man. When I became united to him, my dismay at being an orphan disappeared, and I no longer regretted the lost retreat of the temple. He was as sweet as my deceased father. With him I felt as safe as with the priest. All perplexity had disappeared. Nay, it had been forgotten. So far was it from my virginal heart. I had in fact understood that there was no reason whatsoever for hesitation or fear with regard to Joseph. My virginity entrusted to Joseph was safer than a child in his mother's arms. But now, how could I tell him that I was a mother? I endeavored to find suitable words to give him the news, a difficult task, as I did not want to boast of God's gift, and on the other hand, there was no way of justifying my maternity without saying, "The Lord has loved me amongst all women and has made me his servant, his bride." Neither did I wish to deceive him by concealing my condition from him. And while I was praying, the Spirit of whom I was full said to me, "Be silent. Entrust me with the task of justifying you with your spouse." When? How? I did not ask. I had always relied upon God, and I had always allowed myself to be led by him exactly as a flower is led away by running water. The Eternal Father had never abandoned me without his help. His hand had always supported, protected, and guided me so far. It would do so also now. Oh, my daughter, how beautiful and comforting is faith in our eternal good God. He holds us in his arms as in a cradle. Like a boat, he steers us into the bright harbour of goodness. He warms our hearts, comforts and nourishes us. He bestows rest and happiness, light and guardians on us. Reliance on God is everything, and God grants everything to those who trust him. He gives himself. That evening I elevated to perfection my reliance as a creature. Now I was able to do so because God was in me. Before, I had the confidence of a poor creature, such as I was, a mere nothing, even if I was so much loved as to be the faultless one. But now I had a divine confidence, because God was mine, my spouse, my son. Oh, what a joy to be one with God, not for my own glory, but to love him with a total union and say to him, you only are in me. Please assist me with your divine perfection in everything I do. If he had not said to me, be silent, I would probably have dared to say to Joseph, with my face bowed to the ground, the Spirit has penetrated me, and now the embryo of God is in me. And he would have believed me because he held me in high esteem, and because, like those who never lie, he could not believe that others lied. Yes, to avoid hurting his feelings in future, I would have overcome my reluctance to praise myself. But I obeyed the divine command, and for months after that moment, I felt the first wound pierce my heart. It was the first pain in my destiny of co-redeemer. I offered and suffered in it, in atonement, and to give you a guidance for similar circumstances in life, when it is necessary to suffer in silence for an event that casts a bad light on you in relation to those who love you. Entrust God with the protection of your reputation and affections. If you deserve God's protection with a holy life, you can proceed safely. Even if the whole world is against you, he will defend you with regard to those who love you and will cause the truth to be known. Now rest, my dear, and be more and more my dear daughter. The Poem of the Man God, Volume 1, Chapter 19, Mary and Joseph set out for Jerusalem. 27th of March, 1944. I see their departure to go to St. Elizabeth's. Joseph has come with 2 little donkeys to fetch Mary, one for himself, the other for Mary. One of the little animals has the usual saddle with a strange gadget attached to it. Later I gather it is a kind of a luggage rack on which Joseph fastens a small wooden casket, a small trunk we would call it nowadays, which he brought for Mary's clothes to prevent them from getting wet. I hear Mary thank Joseph wholeheartedly for the provident gift, in which she packs what she takes out of a parcel she had made up previously. They close the door of the house and start off. It is daybreak, for I can see the rosy dawn in the east. Nazareth is still asleep. The 2 early travellers meet only a shepherd who is driving forward his little sheep, which are trotting along, one against the other, jammed in a close flock. They are all bleating. The little lambs with their shrill, sharp voices bleat more than the others, and want their mother's breasts even while moving. But the mothers are hurrying towards the pastures, and with their louder bleatings, they urge the little ones to follow them. Mary looks and smiles, and since she has stopped to let the herd go by, she bends on the saddle and caresses the mild little beasts that pass near her donkey. When the shepherd arrives, carrying a newborn little lamb in his arms, and he stops to speak to Mary, she smiles and caresses the pinkish little face of the lamb that is bleating desperately, and she exclaims, "It's looking for its mother. Here is your mother. She won't leave you. Of course she won't, little lamb." In fact, the ewe rubs herself against the shepherd, then stands up on her hind legs and licks the face of her little one. The herd passes by, making the noise of water drops falling on leaves. Behind it, there is the dust raised by the trotting feet of the sheep and the patterns of their footprints on the dusty road. Joseph and Mary take to the road again. Joseph is wearing his large mantle. Mary has on a kind of a striped shawl, because it is a very cool morning. They are now in the country, and they are proceeding one beside the other. They seldom speak. Joseph is thinking of his business. Mary is following her own thoughts, and in her concentration she smiles at them. At times she looks around and smiles at the things she sees. Now and again she looks at Joseph, and then an expression of sad gravity darkens her face. Then she smiles again, still looking at her provident spouse, who speaks so little, and when he does speak it is only to ask her whether she is comfortable and whether she needs anything. By now there are many people on the road, particularly near and inside villages. But Mary and Joseph do not pay much attention to the people they meet. They proceed on their trotting donkeys, in the midst of the noise of the harness bells, and they stop only once in the shade of a thicket to eat some bread and olives and to drink at a well that runs down from a grotto. They stop later to take shelter from a sudden heavy downpour from a very dark cloud. They have taken cover under the mountain, against a protruding rock that protects them from most of the heavy rain. Joseph wants Mary to put on his big mantle, which is proof against water, and he insists so much that Mary is obliged to yield to the insistence of her spouse, who, to reassure her of his own immunity, covers his head and shoulders with a small grey blanket which was on the saddle. Probably the donkey's blanket. Now Mary looks like a little monk, with her face framed by the hood and the mantle closed round her neck and covering all her body. The shower slackens and turns into a tedious drizzling rain. Mary and Joseph start off again along a muddy road, but it is springtime, and after a short while the sun makes the journey more comfortable. Also, the two little donkeys are now trotting more happily along the road. I do not see anything else, because the vision ends here. The Poem of the Man God, Volume 1, Chapter 20, From Jerusalem to Zacharias' House, 28th of March, 1944. We are in Jerusalem. I know the town very well now, with its streets and gates. The first thing Mary and Joseph do is to go to the temple. I recognize the stable where Joseph left his donkey on the day of Jesus' presentation in the temple. Also now he leaves the two donkeys there after feeding them, and then he goes with Mary to worship the Lord. When they come out, they enter a house which apparently belongs to people they know. They take some refreshments there, and Mary rests until Joseph comes back with a little old man. This man is going your way. You will not have to travel a long way by yourself to get to your relatives. You can trust him because I know him. They get on their donkeys again, and Joseph goes with Mary as far as the gate. It is not the one they entered, but a different one, and they part there. Mary proceeds with the little old man, who is as talkative as Joseph was silent, and takes an interest in many things. Mary answers him patiently. In front of the saddle, she has now the little trunk which Joseph's donkey had carried earlier, and she is no longer wearing the large mantle. Neither has she on the shawl, which is folded on the trunk, and she is really beautiful in a dark blue dress and white veil that protects her from the sun. How beautiful she is! The old man must be somewhat deaf, because Mary, who is wont to speak in a very low voice, had to speak loudly to make herself heard. And now he is tired. He has finished with all his questions and news, and is dozing on the saddle, led by the donkey that is familiar with the road. Mary takes advantage of this respite to collect her thoughts and to pray. It must be a prayer that she sings in a low voice, looking at the blue sky with her arms crossed over her breast, while her face is bright and happy because of some internal emotion. I see nothing else. And even now that the vision is interrupted, as it happened yesterday, I am left with Mother near me, visible to my internal sight so clearly that I can describe for you the light, rosy hue of her cheeks, not very chubby but gently soft, the bright red of her little lips, and her clear blue eyes sweetly shining between her dark blonde eyelashes. I can tell you how her hair, divided into two on the crown of her head, falls softly with 3 undulations on each side, as far down as to cover half of her little rosy ears, and then disappears with its pale, shiny gold behind the veil covering her head. Because I see her with her mantle over her head, wearing a dress of luminant silk and the dark mantle as thin as a veil, of the same cloth as the dress. I can tell you that her dress is tight round her neck by means of a sheathing inside, which runs a cord, the ends of which form a knot in front of the base of her neck. Likewise, her dress is gathered at her waist by a thicker cord, also of white silk, hanging down her side with 2 tassels. I can even tell you that her dress, tight as it is at her neck and waist, forms 7 round soft folds on her breast, the only ornament of a very modest garment. I can inform you of the chastity emanating from all her aspect, from her so delicate and harmonious forms, which make her such an angelical woman. And the more I look at her, the more I suffer thinking of how much they made her suffer. And I wonder how they could have had no mercy on her, so meek and kind, so delicate also in her physical appearance. I look at her, and I can hear once again all the shouting on Calvary, also against her, all the mockery and insults, all the maledictions shouted against her because she was the mother of the convict. Now I see her beautiful and tranquil, but her present countenance does not cancel the memory of her tragical face during those hours of agony, or that of her desolate face in the house in Jerusalem after Jesus' death, and I would like to be able to caress and kiss her cheek, so delicately rosy and soft, to remove with my kiss that remembrance of grievous tears, as she certainly remembers as I do. You cannot believe how much peace it gives me to have her near me. I think that to die seeing her must be as sweet and even sweeter than the sweetest hour of one's lifetime. During the time that I did not see her thus, all for myself, her absence was a great sorrow to me, just like the absence of a mother. I now feel once again the ineffable joy which was my companion in December and early January, and I am happy, notwithstanding that the sight of the torture of the passion casts a veil of grief on all my happiness. It is difficult to explain and make you understand what I feel and what has been happening since February the 11th, when in the evening I saw Jesus suffer in his passion. That sight has changed me completely. Whether I die now or in 100 years' time, that vision will always be the same in intensity and consequences. Previously, I used to think of the sorrows of Christ. Now I live them, because one word or a glance at an image is enough to make me suffer all over again what I suffered that evening, and be horrified at those tortures. And I grieve over his desolate sufferings, and even if nothing reminds me of them, their remembrance tears my heart. Mary is beginning to speak, and I become silent. Mary says, "I will not speak much, because you are very tired, my poor daughter. I only wish to draw your attention and the attention of readers to the constant habit of Joseph and mine of giving priority to prayer. Tiredness, haste, worries, occupations never hindered our prayer. On the contrary, they helped it. It was always the queen of our occupations, our relief, our light, our hope. If in sad moments it was a consolation, in happy ones it was a song. But it was always the constant friend of our souls. It detached us from the earth, from our exile, and it raised us up toward heaven, our fatherland. Not only I, who by now had God with me, and I had but to look at my bosom to worship the Holy of Holies. But also Joseph felt united to God when he prayed, because our prayers were a true adoration of our whole beings, which melted with God by worshipping him and by being embraced by him. And please note that not even I, although I had the eternal God in me, not even I felt exempted from respectful homage to the temple. The deepest holiness does not exempt anyone from feeling a mere nothing with regard to God, and from converting such nothingness into an endless hosanna to God's glory, since he allowed us to do so. Are you weak, poor, faulty? Invoke the holiness of the Lord. Holy, holy, holy. Invoke the blessed Holy One to assist you in your misery. He will come and instill his holiness into you. Are you holy and rich in merits in the eyes of God? Invoke the holiness of the Lord just the same. It is infinite and will increase yours. The angels, who are superior to the weaknesses of mankind, do not cease singing their Sanctus, not even for an instant, and their supernatural beauty increases with each invocation of the holiness of our God. Imitate the angels. Never divest yourselves of the protection of prayer, which blunts the weapons of Satan, the malice of the world, the incentives of the flesh, and mental pride. Never lay down this weapon, which causes heaven to open and pour out its graces and blessings. The world needs a shower of prayers to be purified from the sins that draw punishments from God. And since only few people pray, those few must pray as if there were many. They must multiply their living prayers to make up the necessary amount to obtain graces. Prayers are living when they are flavored with true love and sacrifice. My dear daughter, it is a good thing, pleasing to God and meritorious, that you should suffer because of the sufferings of my Jesus and mine, in addition to your own. Your sympathetic love is so dear to me, but do you want to kiss me? Kiss the wounds of my son. Dress them with the balm of your love. I suffered spiritually the pangs of the scourges, of the thorns and the torture of the nails and of the cross. And likewise, I feel spiritually all the caresses given to my Jesus, as they are as many kisses given to me. And then come, I am the Queen of Heaven, but I am always the Mother. And I am happy. The Poem of Man God, Volume 1, Chapter 21. Arrival at Zacharias' house. I am now in a mountainous place. They are not high mountains, neither are they just hills. They are ridges and creeks as we see in our Apennines in Tuscany and Umbria. The vegetation is thick and beautiful, and there is plenty of fresh water that keeps the pastures green and the orchards fruitful. Apple and fig trees are mostly cultivated in the orchards, and grapes near the houses. It must be springtime because the grapes are rather big, about the size of vetch grains, and the apple blossoms have already sprung, and they look like so many little green pellets. On top of the fig branches, the first fruits can be seen, still in the embryo stage, but already well formed. The meadows are real soft multicolored carpets. Sheep are grazing or resting on them, and they look like white spots on the emerald of the grass. Mary on her donkey is climbing up a rather well-kept road, probably the main road. She is climbing because the village is higher up and looks quite tidy. My internal warner says to me, "This place is Hebron." You spoke to me of Montana. I cannot help it. It is indicated to me with this name. I do not know whether Hebron is the whole area or only the village. That is what I hear, and that is what I say. Mary is now entering the village. It is evening. Some women on their doorsteps watch the arrival of the stranger and gossip with one another. Their eyes follow her, and they are not happy until they see her stop in front of one of the prettiest houses in the center of the village. With a kitchen garden in front and rear, and a well-cultivated orchard around it, the orchard continues into a large meadow that rises and slopes according to the sinuosity of the mountain, and ends in a wood of tall trees, beyond which I do not know what there is. The whole place is surrounded by a hedge of blackberries or wild roses. I cannot tell exactly which, because if you remember, the flowers and leaves of these two thorny hedges are very much alike, and until their branches bear fruit, it is easy to confuse them. In front of the house, that is on the side that skirts the village, the place is enclosed by a small, low white wall, on top of which there are rows of rose bushes, at present without flowers, but already full of buds. In the center there is an iron gate. It is easily understood that it is the house of a notable of the village or of a well-to-do family, because everything shows comfort and great order, if not riches and pomp. Mary gets off the donkey and goes to the gate. She looks through the iron bars, but does not see anyone. She endeavors then to make herself heard. A little old woman, who, more curious than the others, has followed her, shows her a strange gadget that is used as a bell. It consists of two pieces of metal balanced on a kind of yoke, at the end of which there is a rope. When the rope is pulled, the two metal pieces strike each other and give the sound of a bell or a gong. Mary pulls the rope, but so gently that there is only a faint tinkling, which no one hears. Then the little old woman, whose face is all nose and slipper chin, and whose tongue is worth 10 put together, gets hold of the rope and pulls it several times with all her might. She makes enough noise to raise a dead man. "That's how you do it, woman. Otherwise, how can they hear you? You know Elizabeth is old, and Zacharias is also old. Now he is also dumb, as well as deaf. Also the two servants are old, don't you know? Have you ever been here before? Don't you know, Zacharias, are you—" Mary is rescued from the deluge of information and questions by a little old man, who suddenly appears panting. He must be a gardener or a farmer, for he is holding a hoe in his hand, and there is a pruning knife tied to his belt. He opens the gate, and Mary enters, thanking the little woman, but leaving her fairly recent questions unanswered. What a disappointment for the curious soul. As soon as she is inside, Mary says, "I am Mary of Joachim and Anne from Nazareth. I am your master's cousin." The man bows down and welcomes her. He then calls out in a loud voice, "Sarah! Sarah!" He opens the gate again to let in the donkey that had been left outside. Mary, in fact, to get rid of the persistent little woman, had slipped inside very quickly, and the gardener just as quickly had closed the gate in the face of the gossip. And while taking the donkey in, he exclaims, "Oh, what a great happiness, and what an upheaval to this household! Heaven has granted a child to the barren one. May the Most High be blessed. But 7 months ago, Zacharias came back dumb from Jerusalem. He now makes himself understood by gestures or by writing. Perhaps you already know. My landlady has longed so much for you in this joy and in this travail. She always spoke to Sarah about you, and she would say, 'If I only had little Mary with me, I wish she was still in the temple. I would send Zacharias to fetch her. But now the Lord wanted her married to Joseph of Nazareth. She is the only one who can comfort me in my pain and help me to pray to God, because she is so good, and they all miss her in the temple.' On the last feast day, the last time I went to Jerusalem with Zacharias to thank the Lord for the child he has given me, her teachers said to me, 'The temple seems to be without the cherubim of the glory, since Mary's voice is no longer heard inside these walls.' He then shouts again, 'Sarah, Sarah!' My wife is a little deaf, but come, please, I'll show you the way." Instead of Sarah, a fairly old woman appears at the top of the staircase on one side of the house. Her face is all wrinkles and her hair is very grey. It must have been very black at one time, because her eyelashes and eyebrows are still very dark, and also from the color of her face one can tell that she was swarthy. Her present very obvious pregnant condition is a strange contradiction to her evident old age, notwithstanding her wide and loose dress. She looks down, shading her eyes with her hand. As soon as she recognizes Mary, she raises her arms to the sky and utters an "Oh!" of joy and surprise. She then rushes as fast as she can towards Mary. Also Mary, who always moves very quietly, now runs, as swift as a little deer, and reaches the foot of the staircase at the same time as Elizabeth. And she embraces with great affection her cousin, who is crying with joy at seeing her. They remain embraced for an instant, and then Elizabeth detaches herself, exclaiming, "Ah!" an exclamation of mingled joy and sorrow, and she places her hands on her enlarged abdomen. She bows her face and turns red and pale alternately. Mary and the servant hold out their hands to support her because she staggers as if she were unwell. But Elizabeth, after a moment of concentration, lifts her face, which is now so bright that she looks much younger. She then looks at Mary with evident veneration, as if she sees an angel. She bows in a deep salutation, exclaiming, "You are blessed amongst all women. Blessed is the fruit of your womb." She says exactly that, 2 clearly separate sentences. How did I deserve that the mother of my Lord should come to me, your servant? There, at the sound of your voice, the child leaped out of joy in my womb, and when I embraced you, the Spirit of the Lord whispered deepest truths to my heart. You are blessed because you believed that it was possible for God, also what does not appear possible to the human mind. You are blessed because by your faith you will accomplish the things the Lord predicted to you and the prophets foretold for our times. You are blessed for the salvation you have brought to the house of Jacob. You are blessed for the holiness you have brought to my son, whom I feel leaping with joy like a happy little kid in my womb, because he feels free from the burden of guilt and is called to be the predecessor, sanctified before redemption by the Holy One who is growing within you. Mary, with 2 tears that run down like 2 pearls from her sparkling eyes to her smiling lips, with her face raised to heaven, and also her arms raised up, in the attitude that her Jesus will take so often, exclaims, "My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord." And she continues the canticle as it has been handed down to us. At the end, at the verse, "He has come to the help of Israel, his servant," etc., she puts her hands on her breast, kneeling down, stooping to the ground, adoring God. The servant, who quite wisely had disappeared when he realized that Elizabeth was not really physically unwell, on the contrary, she was confiding her thoughts to Mary, is now coming back from the orchard with a solemn old man, whose hair and beard are completely white, and who greets Mary from a distance with great gestures and loud guttural sounds. "Zacharias is arriving," says Elizabeth, touching the shoulder of Mary, engrossed in prayer. "My Zacharias is dumb. God has punished him because he did not believe. I will tell you later, but now I hope that God will forgive him, because you have come, you, full of grace." Mary rises and goes to meet Zacharias. She stoops to the ground in front of him, kissing the hem of his white robe that reaches down to the ground. It is a very wide robe, held tight to the waist by a large embroidered braid. Zacharias welcomes Mary by gestures, and they both move toward Elizabeth. They all enter a room on the ground floor. It is a wide room, tastefully arranged, where they make Mary sit down and they offer her some new milk. There is still foam on it, and some small cakes. Elizabeth gives some orders to the maidservant, who has appeared at last, her hands still covered with flour, and her hair whiter than usual because of the flour dust on it. Perhaps she was baking bread. She gives orders also to the male servant, whose name I hear is Samuel, and tells him to take Mary's trunk to a room which she indicates to him. She thus fulfills her duties of a landlady towards a guest. In the meantime, Mary is replying to the questions Zacharias is asking her, writing them on a wax tablet with a style. From her answers, I understand that he's asking her about Joseph and her married life with him. I also understand that Zacharias has been denied all supernatural light about Mary's state and her condition of mother of the Messiah. Elizabeth goes near her husband and, laying her hand on his shoulder in a loving attitude, as if she were caressing him chastely, she says to him, "Also, Mary is a mother. Rejoice over her happiness." But she does not say anything else. She looks at Mary, and Mary looks at her, but does not encourage her to say more, and Elizabeth keeps silent. A sweet, very sweet vision. It obliterates the horror of the sight of Judas's suicide. Last night, before falling asleep, I saw Mary crying, bent over the unction stone, on the dead body of our Redeemer. She was on his right-hand side, with her back to the opening of the sepulchre grotto. The torches lit up her face, so that I could see her poor face ravaged by sorrow and washed by tears. She would take Jesus' hand, caress it, warm it against her cheeks, kiss it, stretch its fingers out. Kiss them one by one, those poor, motionless fingers. Then she would caress his face, would bend down to kiss his open mouth, his half-open eyes, his wounded forehead. The reddish light of the torches made the wounds of the tortured body appear more real and rendered the cruelty of his torture and the realism of his death more true and real. And I remained in contemplation until my mind was clear. When I came out of my sopa, I prayed and I lay down to go to sleep. Then the above vision began. But Mother said to me, "Don't move, just look. You will write it tomorrow." In my sleep, I dreamt it all over again. When I woke up at 6:30, I saw what I had already seen both when I was awake and in my sleep, and I wrote while I was seeing. Then you came, and I asked you if I could add the following. They are various sketches of Mary's stay in Zacharias' house. The Poem of Man God, Volume 1, Chapter 22. Mary and Elizabeth speak of their children. 2nd of April, 1944. It is morning. I see Mary sewing, sitting in the room on the ground floor. Elizabeth is going to and fro, busy with the housework. And when she comes into Mary's room, she never fails to go and caress her fair head, which looks even more fair against the rather dark walls and in the beautiful sun rays that enter through the door, open onto the garden. Elizabeth bends down to look at Mary's work, the embroidery she had in Nazareth, and she praises its beauty. "I have also some linen to spin," says Mary. "For your child?" "No, I had it already when I never thought." Mary does not say anything else, but I understand. When I never thought I was to be the mother of God. "But now you will have to use it for him. Is it good? Fine? Children, you know, need very soft material." "I know." I had begun late, because I wanted to be sure that it was not a deception of the evil one, although I felt such a joy within me that it could not possibly come from Satan. After, I suffered so much. I am old, Mary, really old. To be in this state, I suffered so much. Don't you suffer? No, I don't. I have never been so well. Of course, quite right. You, there is no stain in you, as God chose you for his mother, and that is why you are not subject to Eve's sufferings. The one you bear is holy. I feel as if I had a wing in my heart and not a burden. I seem to have within me all the flowers and all the birds that sing in springtime, and all the honey and all the sunshine. Oh, I am so happy. Blessed Mary, neither do I feel any longer burden, tiredness, or pain since I saw you. I seem to be new, young, freed from the miseries of woman's flesh. My child, after leaping happily at the sound of your voice, is now quiet in his joy, and I seem to have him in me, as in a living cradle, and I see him sleeping satisfied and happy, breathing like a little bird under the wings of its mother. I will now start working. He will no longer be a weight. I cannot see very well, but never mind, Elizabeth. I will see to the spinning and weaving, both for you and for your baby. I am quick, and my sight is very good. But you will have to see to you. Oh, there will be plenty of time. First, I will take care of you, since you are going to have your baby very shortly, and later I will see to my Jesus. It is beyond human possibility to tell you how sweet are Mary's expression and voice, how bright her eyes are with sweet, happy tears, and how she smiles in pronouncing that name, looking at the clear blue sky. She seems to be enraptured, simply saying, Jesus. Elizabeth exclaims, "What a beautiful name! The name of the Son of God, of our Redeemer." Oh, Elizabeth! Mary becomes sad, and she seizes the hands of her relative, who had laid them across her enlarged abdomen. Tell me, since you were illuminated by the Spirit of the Lord when I came here, and you prophesied what the world does not know, tell me, what will my creature have to suffer to save the world? The prophets, oh, what do the prophets say of the Savior? Isaiah, do you remember Isaiah? He is the man of sorrows. Through his wounds we are healed. He has pierced through for our faults, crushed for our sins. Yahweh has been pleased to crush him with suffering. After being condemned, he was lifted up. What lifting is he referring to? They call him the Lamb, and I cannot help thinking of the Lamb of the Passover, the Lamb of Moses. And I associate it with the serpent elevated by Moses on a cross. Elizabeth, Elizabeth, what will they do to my creature? What will he have to suffer to save the world? Mary is crying. Elizabeth comforts her. Mary, don't cry. He's your son, but he is also the Son of God. God will see to his son and will look after you, his mother. And if so many will be cruel to him, so many will love him, so many, forever and ever. The world will look at your son and will bless you with him. They will bless you, for you are the spring from which redemption gushes out. The destiny of your son, he will be raised to the rank of king of the whole creation. Just think of that, Mary. King, because he will redeem the whole creation, and as such, he will be universal king, and he will be loved also in the world, in its lifetime. My son will precede yours and will love him, the angel told Zacharias, and he wrote it down for me. How painful it is to see my Zacharias dumb. But I hope that when the baby is born, also the father will be freed from his punishment. Will you pray too, since you are the seat of the power of God and the cause of delight in the world? To obtain this grace, I make my office to the Lord as best I can. I offer my creature, because it belongs to him, as he lent it to his servant to grant her the joy of being called mother. It is the testimony of what God has done for me. I want its name to be John. Isn't my son a grace? And didn't God grant it me? And God, I am sure, will grant you the grace. I will pray with you. I suffer so much seeing him dumb. Elizabeth is crying. When he writes, as he can no longer speak to me, there seems to be mountains and oceans between me and my Zacharias. After so many years of sweet conversation, now there is nothing but silence from his mouth. And particularly now, when it would be so nice to talk about who is about to come. I even refrain from speaking to avoid see him getting strained in his efforts to reply to me by gestures. I have cried so much. How much did I long for you? The people of the village watch, talk, and criticize. Such is the world. But when one has a pain or a joy, one needs to be understood, not criticized. But now my life seems completely improved. I feel a joy in me since you came here. I feel that my test is about to end and that I will soon be completely happy. I am right, am I not? I have resigned myself to everything. But if God would only forgive my husband, if I could only hear him pray once again. Mary caresses and comforts her, and in order to divert her attention, she invites her to take a little walk in the sunny garden. They walk under a well-cultivated pergola, as far as a little rustic tower, in the holes of which doves are nested. Mary scatters the bird seed, laughing, because the doves have rushed on her, cooing loudly and flapping noisily, forming iridescent circles around her. They alight on her head, shoulders, arms, and on her hands, stretching their rosy beaks to snatch the grains from her hands, gracefully pecking at the Virgin's rosy lips and her teeth that shine in the sun. Mary takes the golden corn from a little sack, and she laughs in the middle of that tournament of intrusive greed. "How fond they are of you," points out Elizabeth. "You have only been here a few days, and they love you more than me, although I have always taken care of them." They continue walking until they reach an enclosure at the end of the orchard, where there are about 20 goats with their little kids. "Have you come back from the pasture?" Mary asks a little shepherd, caressing him. "Yes, because my father said to me, 'Go home, because it is going to rain shortly and there are some sheep about to lamb. Make sure they have a dry herb and litter. There he is, he's coming.' And he points to the wood, whence a continual trembling beating can be heard. Mary caresses the little kid, as fair as a child, which rubs itself against her, and together with Elizabeth she drinks some new milk that the little shepherd offers them. Then the sheep arrive, led by a shepherd as hairy as a bear, but he is obviously a good man because he's carrying a groaning sheep on his shoulders. He puts her down gently and explains. "She's about to lamb. She can only walk with difficulty. I put her on my shoulders and I hurried all the way to get here in time." The sheep, still limping painfully, is led into the fold by the boy. Mary is sitting on a stone and is playing with the little kids and the lambs, offering clover flowers to the pretty rosy little vases. A black and white kid puts its little hooves on her shoulder and smells her hair. "It is not bread," says Mary, laughing. "I will bring you some crumbs tomorrow. Be good now." Once again, cheerful, Elizabeth also laughs. I see Mary, who is spinning very quickly under the pergola, where the grapes are growing bigger and bigger. Some time must have elapsed, because the apples are beginning to redden on the trees, and the bees are humming near the fig flowers already mature. Elizabeth is now quite stout, and she is walking heavily. Mary looks at her carefully and lovingly. Also, Mary's sides appear more round when she gets up to pick up the spindle which has fallen far away from her. The expression on her face has changed. It is more mature. Before she was a girl. Now she is a woman. The women go into the house because it is now getting dark, and the lamps are lit in the room. While waiting for supper, Mary begins to weave. "Does it never tire you?" asks Elizabeth, pointing to the loom. "No, you can be sure of that. I am exhausted by this heat. I have not suffered any longer, but now the weight is too heavy for my old kidneys. Take courage, you will soon be free. How happy you will be then. I am longing to be a mother. My child, my Jesus, what will he be like? As beautiful as you are, Mary. Oh no, more beautiful. He's God. I am his maid. What I meant is, will he be fair or dark? Will his eyes be like a clear sky, or like the eyes of a mountain deer? I imagine him more beautiful than a cherub, with golden curly hair, his eyes the same color as the Sea of Galilee when the stars begin to peep on the horizon, his tiny little mouth as red as a pomegranate that bursts when it matures in the sun, and his cheeks as pink as this pale rose, with two little hands that could be contained in the hollow of a lily. They are so small and tiny, and the two tiny feet that I can hold in the hollow of my hand, so soft and smooth, even more so than the petal of a flower. See, the idea I form of him is taken from all the beautiful things that nature suggests to me, and I can hear his voice when he cries, because my child will cry a little when he's hungry or sleepy, and it will always be a great pain for his mummy, whose heart will be pierced every time she hears him cry. When he cries, his voice will be like the bleating that now comes from a little lamb, only a few hours old, when it seeks its mother's breast and a warm maternal fleece to sleep. When he laughs, and my heart in love with my creature will then be full of heaven, for I can be in love with him, because he is my God, and it will not be against my consecrated virginity to love him as a lover. His voice, when he laughs, will be like the merry cooing of a happy little dove, which is full and content in its cozy little nest. And I think of him when he is taking his first steps, a little bird hopping on a flowery meadow. The meadow will be his mother's heart. It will be laid under his tiny pink feet with all her love, so that he may not tread on anything that may hurt him. Oh, how I will love my child, my son. Also Joseph will love him. But you will have to tell Joseph. Mary's face darkens and she sighs. Yes, I will have to tell him. I wish heaven would tell him, because it is so difficult to tell. Shall I tell him? We will ask him to come for John's circumcision. No, I have entrusted God with the task of informing him of his happy destiny of putative father of the Son of God, and he will do so. The Spirit said to me that evening, "Be silent, entrust me with the task of justifying you." And he will do so. God never lies. It is a great trial, but with the help of the Eternal Father, it will be overcome. No one must learn from my mouth what the benignity of the Lord has done. Certainly you are the exception, because the Spirit revealed it to you. I have not mentioned it to anybody, not even to Zacharias, who would have been very happy. He thinks you are a mother according to nature. I know. And I decided that, out of prudence. The secrets of God are holy. The angel of the Lord did not reveal my divine maternity to Zacharias. He could have done so if God had wanted, because God knew that the time for the incarnation of his word in me was already imminent. But God hid this joyful light from Zacharias, who rejected your late maternity as something impossible. I have complied with the will of God, as you have seen. You perceived the secret living in me. He did not perceive anything until the screen of his incredulity does not fall before the power of God. He will be separated from supernatural lights. Elizabeth sighs and becomes silent. Zacharias comes in. He offers some parchment rolls to Mary. It is the hour of prayer before supper. Mary prays in a loud voice in place of Zacharias. Then they settle down at the table. When you are no longer with us, how we shall regret having no longer anyone to pray for us, says Elizabeth, looking at her dumb husband. You will pray then, Zacharias, says Mary. He shakes his head and writes, I will never be able to pray again for another people. I become unworthy when I doubted of my God. Zacharias, you will pray. God forgives. The old man wipes a tear and sighs. After supper, Mary goes back to the loom. That's enough, says Elizabeth. You will become too tired. Your time is approaching, Elizabeth. I want to prepare for your child clothes worthy of him, who will precede the king of the house of David. Zacharias writes, Of whom will he be born, and where? Mary replies, Where the prophet said, and of whom the eternal Father will choose. Whatever our most high Lord does is well done. Zacharias writes, Well, in Bethlehem then, in Judah, we shall go and worship him, woman, and you will come to Bethlehem too, with Joseph. And Mary, bowing her head over the loom, says, I will come. The vision ends thus. Mary says, The first charity towards our neighbours is to be exerted towards our neighbours. This must not seem a pun to you. There is charity towards God and charity towards our neighbours. Charity towards our neighbours comprises also charity towards ourselves. But if we love ourselves more than our neighbours, we are no longer charitable, we are selfish. Also, in lawful matters, we must be so holy as to always give priority to the needs of our neighbour. Be sure, my children, that God provides for the generous by means of his power and his bounty. It was this certainly that led me to Hebron to assist my relative in her condition, and to my eagerness for human help, God, giving beyond measure as he is wont, added an unforeseen gift of supernatural assistance. I went to give material help, and God sanctified my good intention by sanctifying through it the fruit of Elizabeth's womb. And by means of that sanctification, by which the Baptist was pre-sanctified, he relieved the physical pain of the elderly daughter of Eve, who had conceived at an unusual age. Elizabeth, a woman of fearless faith and confident submission to God's will, deserved to understand the mystery that was enclosed within me. The Spirit spoke to her through the bouncing in her womb. The Baptist pronounced his first speech as the announcer of the word, through the veils and the diaphragm of veins and flesh that separated and united him at the same time to his holy mother. Neither did I deny my prerogative of being the mother of the Lord, because she was worthy of the information, and the light had revealed itself to her. To deny it would have meant denying God the praise that it was just should be given to him, the praise that I bore in me, and which, since I could not tell anyone, I repeated to the herbs, to the flowers, to the stars, to the sun, to the singing birds, and the patient sheep, to the warbling waters, to the golden light that kissed me descending from heaven. But it is sweeter to pray together rather than say our prayers by ourselves. I would have liked all the world to know of my destiny, not for my own sake, but that they might join me in praising my Lord. Prudence forbade me to reveal the truth to Zacharias. That would have implied going beyond the work of God, and if I was his spouse and mother, I was still his servant, and I could not take the liberty of substituting him and exceeding him in a decree, simply because he had loved me beyond measure. Elizabeth in her holiness understood, and was silent, because a holy person is always submissive and humble. That is why I worked for Elizabeth, postponing my own work. I was not afraid that I would have no time. God is the master of time. He provides for those who hope in him, also in normal things. Selfishness does not speed matters up. It delays them. Charity does not delay. It speeds up. Always bear that in mind. How much peace there was in Elizabeth's house. If I had not been worried about Joseph and my child, who was the Redeemer of the world, I would have been happy. But the cross was already casting its shadow on my life, and I heard the voices of the prophets like a knell. My name was Mary. Bitterness was always mingled with the sweetness that God poured into my heart, and it increased more and more until the death of my son. But when God called us, Mary, to the destiny of victims for his glory, oh, it is sweet to be ground like corn in the millstone, to convert our pain into a bread that can strengthen the weak and make them capable of reaching heaven. Now it is enough. You are tired and happy. Rest now with my blessing. The Poem of Man-God, Volume 1, Chapter 23, The Birth of the Baptist, 3rd of April, 1944. This vision of peace descends from heaven amid the disgusting things which the world nowadays offers us, and I do not know how that can be, because I am like a little twig at the mercy of the wind in my continuous conflicts with human wickedness, so discordant with what lives within me. We are still in Elizabeth's house. It is a beautiful summer evening, still clear in the last rays of the sun, and yet the sky is already decorated with a falcated moon that looks like a silver comma attached to a large, deep blue cloth. The rose bushes give off strong perfume, and the bees, like humming gold drops, are making their last flights in the quiet, warm evening air. From the meadows, there is a strong smell of hay dried in the sun. It is almost like that of bread, of warm bread, just taken out of the oven. Perhaps it comes also from the many sheets hanging everywhere to dry, and which Sarah is now folding. Mary is walking with her cousin, linking arms with her. They go up and down very slowly under the semi-dark pergola. But Mary watches everything, and while taking care of Elizabeth, she sees that Sarah is ill at ease in folding a long sheet which she has taken off a hedge. "Sit down here and wait for me," she says to her relative, and she goes to help the old servant, pulling the sheet to straighten it, and then folding it carefully. "They still smell of the sun. They are warm," she says with a smile. And to make the old lady happy, she adds, "This sheet, after your bleaching, has become as beautiful as ever. You are the only one who knows how to do things so well." Sarah goes away overjoyed with a load of scented sheets. Mary goes back to Elizabeth and says, "Let us take a few more steps. They will do you good." And as Elizabeth is tired and does not wish to move, Mary says to her, "Let us go only to see if your doves are all in their nests, and if the water in their tub is clear. We shall then come back home." Doves must be the favourite pets of Elizabeth. When they are in front of the rustic tower, where all the doves are gathered, Elizabeth is deeply moved. In fact, the hens are in the nests and the cocks are in front of them, but neither of them move. Instead, they all start cooing loudly when they see the two women. A gentle form of greeting. Elizabeth is overcome by the weakness of her condition and by fears which make her cry. She expresses her fears to her cousin. "If I should die, what will happen to my poor little doves? You will not be staying here. If you were to remain in my house, it would not matter if I died. I have had the greatest joy a woman can possibly have, the joy which I was no longer expecting to have. And I cannot even complain of death with the Lord, because he has overwhelmed me with his benignity. May he be blessed for it. But there is Zacharias, and then there will be the child, an old man who would feel as though he were lost in a desert without his woman. And the other is so small that he would be like a flower, condemned to die of cold because he is without his mother. Poor baby, without the caresses of his mother. But why are you so sad? God has given you the joy of being a mother, and he will not take it away from you when it is full. Little John will receive all the kisses of his mummy, and Zacharias all the attentions of his faithful wife until the very end of his long life. You are two branches of the same tree. One will not die, leaving the other alone. You are good, and you comfort me. But I am so old to have a son. And now that I am about to have one, I am afraid. Oh no, there is Jesus here. We must not be afraid where there is Jesus. My child relieved your pain. You said that yourself, when he was just a bud newly formed. Now that he's becoming more and more mature, and he already lives as my creature, I can feel in my throat the beating of his little heart. And I feel as if a little nestling with a light, pulsating heart were resting on my throat. He will remove all dangers from you. You must have faith. I have, but if I should die, don't leave Zacharias at once. I know that you are concerned with your own house, but please remain here a little longer to help my husband in his first days of sorrow. I shall stay to take delight in your joy and in the joy of your husband, and I will leave you when you are strong and happy. But now be quiet, Elizabeth. Everything will be all right. Nothing will happen to your household while you are suffering. Zacharias will be served by the most loving maid. Your flowers will be looked after, and your doves will be attended to, and you will find them all beautiful and happy to rejoice with when their loved mistress comes back. Let us go in now, because you're getting pale. Yes, I think I am beginning to suffer again. Perhaps my time has come, Mary. Pray for me. I will support you with my prayer until your labor ends in joy. The two women slowly go back into the house. Elizabeth withdraws to her rooms. Mary, a capable and provident woman, gives the necessary instructions, prepares everything that may be necessary, and at the same time she comforts Zacharias, who is worried. In the house that is sleepless at night, and where one can hear the strange voices of women called in to help, Mary is watchful like a lighthouse on a stormy night. The whole house rotates around her, and she sees to everything, smiling sweetly. And she prays. When she is not called for this or that matter, she concentrates in prayer. She is now in the room where they always gather for their meals and to work. Zacharias is with her, and he sighs and walks up and down uneasily. They have already prayed together. Then Mary has continued to pray. Now, also that the old man, being tired, has sat down on his big chair near the table and is quiet and sleepy. She prays. And when she sees him sleeping with his head resting on his arms crossed on the table, she takes her sandals off to make no noise and walks barefooted. And making less noise than a butterfly fluttering around the room, she takes Zacharias' mantle and lays it on him so gently that he continues to sleep in the comfort of the woolen cloth that protects him from the cold air of the night that comes in gusts from the door, which is very often opened. Then she starts praying again, and she prays more and more intensely, kneeling down, raising her arms, when the painful cries of Elizabeth become heart-rending. Sarah comes in and invites her to go out, Mary goes out barefooted into the garden. "My mistress wants you," she says. "I'm coming." And Mary walks along the house, goes upstairs. She looks like a white angel, wandering in the peaceful starry night. She goes into Elizabeth's room. "Oh, Mary, Mary, what a pain! I can't stand it any longer. Mary, how much pain one must suffer to be a mother." Mary caresses her lovingly and kisses her. "Mary, Mary, let me put my hands on your belly." Mary takes the 2 wrinkled and swollen hands and lays them on her round abdomen, pressing them tightly with her smooth, slender little hands. And she speaks in a low voice, now that they are alone. "Jesus is here, and he hears and sees you. Have faith, Elizabeth. His holy heart is beating more strongly because he is acting for your good. I can feel it throbbing as though I were holding it in my hands. And I understand the words that my child says to me. He's now saying, 'Tell the woman not to be afraid, only a little more pain.' And then, with the first rays of the sun, among the many roses awaiting the morning's rays to open out on their stems, her house will have the most beautiful rose, and it will be John, my predecessor." Elizabeth now presses also her face against Mary's belly and weeps gently. Mary stands for some time in that attitude because the pain seems to ease, giving a moment's relief. And then she beckons everybody to be quiet. She remains standing, beautiful and white, in the pale, faint light of an oil lamp, like an angel near a person who suffers. She's praying. I can see her moving her lips. But even if I did not see them move, I would understand that she is praying from the enraptured expression on her face. Some time goes by, and Elizabeth is in the throes once again. Mary kisses her again and goes out. She goes downstairs very quickly in the moonlight and goes to see if the old man is still sleeping. He is sleeping and moaning in his sleep. Mary makes a gesture of compassion and starts to pray once again. More time passes. The old man awakes from his sleep and lifts up his head, and he is confused because he does not recollect why he is there. Then he remembers, makes a gesture, and utters a guttural exclamation. He then writes, "Is he not born yet?" Mary shakes her head in denial. Zacharias writes, "How much pain! Oh, my poor woman! Will she manage without dying?" Mary takes the hand of the old man and reassures him. "At dawn, in a short while, the baby will be born. Everything will be all right. Elizabeth is strong. How beautiful this day will be. It will soon be daybreak. How beautiful this day will be when the child sees the light. It will be the nicest day of your life. The Lord has kept aside great graces for you, and your child is the announcer of them." Zacharias shakes his head sadly and points to his dumb mouth. He would like to say many things, but cannot. Mary understands and replies, "The Lord will complete your joy. Believe in him completely. Hope in him indefinitely. Love him totally. The Most High will grant you more than you dare hope for. He wants this total faith from you to wash out your past mistrust. Say in your heart with me, 'I believe.' Say it with every beat of your heart. The treasures of God are opened for those who believe in him and in his powerful bounty." The light begins to filter in through the partly open door. Mary opens it. Dawn makes the dewy earth completely white. There is a strong smell of humid earth and green herbs, and the first chirping of the birds, calling one another from branch to branch, can be heard. The old man and Mary move towards the door. They are pale because of the sleepless night, and the light at dawn makes them look even more pale. Mary puts on her sandals and goes to the foot of the staircase and listens. A woman looks out, nods, and then goes back in. Nothing yet. Mary goes into the room and comes back with some warm milk, which she gives to the old man. She goes to the doves, comes back, and disappears into the same room. Perhaps it is the kitchen. She moves around watching. She looks as though she has slept the most perfect sleep. She is so quick and serene. Zacharias is walking up and down the garden very nervously. Mary looks at him compassionately. She then goes again into the usual room, and kneeling near her loom, she prays intensely. Because the cries of Elizabeth are becoming sharper, she bows down to the ground, imploring the Eternal Father. Zacharias comes back in, and seeing her in this prostrate state, the poor old man cries. Mary gets up and takes him by the hand. She's so much younger than he is, but she looks as though she were the mother of the poor old desolate soul, and she pours her consolation on him. They are standing thus, one beside the other, in the sun that makes the morning air rosy, and it is thus that the joyful news reaches them. "He is born! He is born! It is a boy! Happy father, a boy as beautiful as a rose, as beautiful as the sun, as strong and good as his mother. Joy for you, father! Blessed by the Lord who gave you a son that you may offer him to the temple. Glory to God, who has granted posterity to this house. Blessed are you and your sons, who was born to you. May his offspring perpetuate your name for centuries, from generation to generation, and may his descendants always be in union with the eternal Lord." Mary blesses the Lord, weeping for joy. Then the two receive the little one who has been brought to the Father, that he may bless him. Zacharias does not go to Elizabeth. He receives the child, who is screaming desperately, but he does not go to his wife. Mary instead goes, carrying with love the little one, who becomes quiet as soon as she takes him in her arms. The woman who is following her notices this, and she says to Elizabeth, "Woman, your child became quiet immediately when she took him. Look how peaceful he is sleeping, and only heaven knows how restless and strong he is. But look now, he seems a little dove." Mary lays the creature near his mother and caresses her, tidying up her grey hair. "The rose is born," she whispers in a low voice, "and you are alive. Zacharias is happy." "Does he speak?" "Not yet, but hope in the Lord. Rest now. I am staying with you." Mary says, "If my presence had sanctified the Baptist, it did not nullify for Elizabeth the sentence against Eve. You shall give birth to your children in pain, the Eternal Father had said. Only I, because I was without stain, and I had not had any human copulation, was exempted from generating with pain. Sadness and pain are fruits of fault. I, who was the innocent one, had to know also sorrow and sadness, because I was the co-redeemer. But I did not know the torture of generating. No, I did not know that torture. But believe me, daughter, that there never was and never will be a torture of puerpery like mine, as the martyr of a spiritual maternity, which was accomplished on the hardest of beds, the bed of my cross, at the foot of the scaffold of my dying son. Which mother is compelled to generate thus? To blend the torture of her bowels, which contract spasmodically because of the death rattle of her dying creature, with the torture that tears her bowels apart, in the strain of overcoming the horror of having to say, "I love you, come to me who am your mother," to each murderer of her son, born of the most sublime love that heaven ever saw, of the love of a God with a virgin, of the kiss of fire, of the embrace of light which became flesh and made the womb of a woman the tabernacle of God. How much pain to be a mother, says Elizabeth, so much, but nothing when compared to mine. Let me press my hands on your belly. Oh, if you always asked me for that when you suffer. I am the eternal bearer of Jesus. He is in my womb, as you saw last year, like the host in the monstrance. Who comes to me finds him, who leans on me touches him, who addresses me speaks to him. I am his dress. He is my soul. My son is united to his mother more, much more now, than he was in the 9 months that he was in my womb. And every pain is appeased, every hope flourishes, and every grace flows for those who come to me and rest their heads against my bosom. I pray for you, remember that. The beatitude of being in heaven, living in the ray of God, does not cause me to forget my children who are suffering on the earth, and I pray. And all heaven prays, because heaven loves. Heaven is living charity, and charity has mercy on you. But even if I were all by myself, my prayer would be sufficient for the needs of those who hope in God. Because I never stop praying for you all, for the holy and the wicked, to give joy to the holy, to give repentance to the wicked, that they might be saved. Come, come, O children of my sorrow, I am waiting for you at the foot of the cross to grant you graces. The Poem of Man God, Volume 1, Chapter 24, The Circumcision of the Baptist. 4th of April, 1944. I see the house rejoicing. It is the day of the circumcision. Mary has made sure that everything is beautiful and in good order. The rooms are bright with light, the most beautiful cloths, the nicest furnishings are shining everywhere. There is a lot of people. Mary moves agile amongst the various groups. She is very beautiful in a most beautiful white dress. Elizabeth, respected by everybody as a matron, is enjoying most happily her feast. The child is laid on her lap, sated with milk. It is now the moment for the circumcision. We will call him Zacharias. You are old. It is only fair that the child be called after you, say the men. Not at all, exclaims Elizabeth. His name is John. His name must be the witness of the power of God. But has there ever been a John in your kinship? It does not matter. His name is to be John. What do you say, Zacharias? You want your name, don't you? Zacharias shakes his head in denial. He takes his tablet and writes, His name is John. And as soon as he finishes writing, he adds, with his tongue now free, Because God has granted a great grace to me, his father, and to his mother, and to this new servant of his, who will spend his life for the glory of the Lord, and will be called great forever in the world and in the eyes of God, because he will give converted hearts to the Most High Lord. The angel said so, and I did not believe, but now I believe, and the light is now in me. The light is amongst us, but you do not see it. It is its destiny not to be seen, because the souls of men are encumbered and idle. But my Son will see it, and will speak of it, and will turn to it the hearts of the just in Israel. Oh, blessed are those who believe in it, and will always believe in the word of the Lord. And blessed be you, O eternal Lord, God of Israel, because you have visited and redeemed your people. And you have raised up for us a powerful Saviour in the house of your servant David, as you promised by mouth of the holy prophets from ancient times, that you would save us from our enemies and from the hands of all who hate us, to show your mercy to our ancestors, and thus remember your holy covenant. This is the oath you swore to our father Abraham, that you would grant us, free from fear, deliverance from the hands of our enemies, to serve you in heaven and thrive in your presence all our days. and he continues to the end. The people present are most surprised at the name, the miracle, at the words of Zacharias. Elizabeth, who at the first words of Zacharias had uttered a cry of joy, is now weeping, embracing Mary, who is caressing her happily. I do not see the circumcision, I only see them bring back John, who is screaming at the top of his voice. Not even his mother's breast can calm him down. He is kicking like a little colt. Then Mary takes him and lulls him, and he becomes quiet and lies down peacefully. "Now just look," said Sarah. "He's quiet only when she picks him up." The people begin to go away slowly. In the room now, there are only Mary holding the baby in her arms, and Elizabeth, who is most happy. Zacharias comes in and closes the door. He looks at Mary with his eyes full of tears. He wants to speak. Then he's silent. He moves forward. He kneels down in front of Mary. "Bless the poor servant of the Lord," he says to her. "Bless him, because you can do so, since you are carrying him in your womb. The word of the Lord was spoken to me when I admitted my error, and I believed everything I have been told. I see you and your happy destiny. I adore the God of Jacob in you. You are my first temple, where first again a priest I can pray the eternal Father again. You are blessed, because you obtained grace for the world, and you are now bringing the Savior into it. Forgive your servant if he did not see your majesty before. When you came here, you brought us all the graces, because everywhere you go, O full of grace, God works his miracles, and holy are those walls which you enter. Holy become the ears which listen to your voice, and holy the flesh you touch. Holy the hearts, because you grant graces, Mother of the Most High, Virgin of the prophets, expected to bring the Savior to the people of God." Mary smiles, full of humility, and she speaks. "Praise be to the Lord, to him only. From him, not from me, comes every grace, and he grants it to you, that you may love him, and that it may help you to reach perfection in the following years, to deserve his kingdom that my Son will open to the patriarchs, to the prophets, and to the just of the Lord. And since you can now pray before the holy, please pray for the maidservant of the Most High, because to be mother of the Son of God is blissful. To be mother of the Redeemer must be a destiny of deepest sorrow. Pray for me, because I feel my weight of sorrow increasing from hour to hour, and I shall have to bear it all my life. And even if I do not see the details, I feel that it will be heavier than if the whole world were placed on my shoulders of a woman, and I were to offer it to heaven. I alone, poor woman, my child, my son. Ah, your son no longer cries if I lull him, but shall I be able to lull mine, to soothe his pain? Pray for me, priest of God. My heart shudders like a flower in a storm. I look at men, and I love them, but I see the enemy appear behind their faces and make them enemies of God and of my Son Jesus. And the vision ends with the paleness of Mary and the tears that cause her eyes to shine brightly. Mary says, "God forgives him who acknowledges his sin, repents and confesses it with a humble and sincere heart. He does not only forgive, he rewards. Oh, how good is my Lord to those who are humble and sincere, to those who believe in him and trust in him. Clear your souls of what encumbers them and makes them insipid. Prepare your souls to receive the light. As a light in darkness, it is a guide and a holy consolation. O holy friendship with God, beatitude of his faithful ones, wealth unequaled by anything else, who possesses you is never alone and never tastes the bitterness of despair. O holy friendship, you do not eradicate sorrow, because sorrow was the destiny of a God incarnate and can thus be the destiny of man. But you make this sorrow sweet in his bitterness, and you mingle with it a light and a caress which relieve the cross with a celestial touch. And when divine bounty grants you graces, make use of the gift received to give glory to God. Do not be like foolish people who turn a good thing into a harmful weapon, or like lavish persons who convert their wealth to misery. You give me too much sorrow, my children, behind whose faces I see the enemy appear, that is he who hurls himself against my Jesus. Too much sorrow. I would like to be the source of grace for everybody, but too many among you do not want grace. You ask for graces, but with a soul devoid of grace. How can grace succor you if you are her enemies? The great mystery of Good Friday is approaching. It is commemorated and celebrated in churches, but it is necessary to celebrate and commemorate it in your hearts, and to beat your breasts like those who are descending from Golgotha and say, "In truth, this man was the Son of God, the Saviour." And say, "Jesus, for the sake of your name, save us." And say, "Father, forgive us." And finally say, "I am not worthy, but if you forgive me and come to me, my soul will be healed. And I no longer want to commit sin, because I no longer wish to be ill and hateful to you." Pray, children, with the words of my Son. Say to the Father for your enemies, "Father, forgive them." Call the Father who has withdrawn indignant at your errors. "Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? I am a sinner, but if you forsake me, I will perish. Come back, Holy Father, that I may be saved." Entrust your eternal good, your spirit, to the only one who can preserve it unhurt from the demons. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Oh, if with humility and love you surrender your spirit to God, he will lead it as a father leads his little one. Neither will he allow anything to hurt your spirit. Jesus, in his agony, prayed to teach you how to pray. I am reminding you of it in these days of his passion. And you, Mary, since you see my joy of a mother, and you are enraptured by it, consider and remember that I possessed God through an ever-increasing sorrow. It descended into me with the seed of God. Like a gigantic tree, it has grown until it touched heaven with its top and hell with its roots, when I received on my lap the lifeless remains of the flesh of my flesh, and I saw and counted his tortures, and I touched his torn heart to consume my sorrow right until the last drop. The Poem of the Man God. Volume 1, Chapter 25. The Presentation of the Baptist in the Temple. Saint Joseph's Passion. 5th and 6th of April, 1944. This is what I see the night between the Wednesday and Thursday of the Holy Week. I see Zacharias, Elizabeth, Mary, and Samuel getting off a comfortable wagon, to which also Mary's little donkey is tied. Mary is holding little John in her arms, and Samuel has a lamb in a basket with a pigeon in it. They get off at the usual stable, which must be the halting place for all the pilgrims to the temple, who leave their mounts there. Mary calls to the owner and asks him whether anybody arrived from Nazareth the day before or early that morning. "Nobody, woman," replies the little old man. Mary is surprised, but does not say anything else. She gets Samuel to fix her little donkey, and then she joins the two elderly parents, and she explains Joseph's delay. He must have been held up by something, but he will certainly come today. She takes the child again from Elizabeth, to whom she had handed him before, and they all set out for the temple. Zacharias is received with honor by the guards and is greeted and congratulated by other priests. He's very handsome today, in his priestly robes and his joy of happy fatherhood. He looks like a patriarch. I think that Abraham must have been like him when he rejoiced offering Isaac to the Lord. I see the ceremony of the presentation of the new Israelite and the purification of his mother. The ceremony is more stately than Mary's, because the priests celebrated solemnly for the son of another priest. They all rush round the group of women and the child, and are happily engaged with them. Also, some curious people have come near, and I can hear their comments, since Mary is holding the child in her arms. While they move to the appointed place, the people think she is the mother. But a woman says, "It's not possible. Can't you see that she's pregnant? The baby is only a few days old, and she's already with child." "And yet," points out another one, "only she can be the mother. The other woman is old. She must be a relative. But she certainly cannot be the mother at her age. Let us follow them, and we will see who is right." And their surprise becomes even greater when they see that it is Elizabeth who fulfills the purification rite. She offers the bleating lamb in holocaust and the pigeon for sin. "She is the mother, didn't I tell you?" "No." "Yes." The people whisper, still incredulous. They whisper so much that the peremptory "st" comes from the group of priests present at the rite. They are silent for a moment, but start whispering even louder when Elizabeth, radiant with holy pride, takes the child and moves forward in the temple to make the presentation to the Lord. It is she! It's always the mother who makes the offering. What miracle can this be? What will that child be who has been granted to that woman at such an old age? What sign can it be? "Don't you know?" says one who has just arrived panting. "It is the son of Zacharias, the priest of the house of Aaron, the one who became dumb when he was offering incense in the sanctuary." It's a mystery, and now he speaks once again. The birth of his son has untied his tongue. I wonder what spirit spoke to him and paralyzed his tongue to accustom him to be silent about the secrets of God. It is a mystery. What secret truth does Zacharias know? Will his son be the Messiah expected by Israel? He was born in Judea, not in Bethlehem, and not of a virgin. He can't be the Messiah. Who is he then? But the answer remains in the silence of God, and the people are left to their curiosity. The ceremony is over. The priests are now joyfully paying compliments to the mother and the child. The only one who is hardly noticed, nay, is avoided, almost with disgust when they become aware of her condition, is Mary. After all the congratulations, most of them go out onto the road. Mary wants to go to the stable to see whether Joseph has arrived. He has not. Mary is disappointed and worried. Elizabeth is anxious about her. "We can stay until midday, then we must go, to be home for the night. He's too young to be out all night." And Mary, calm and sad, "I will stay in one of the yards of the temple. I will go to my teachers. I do not know. I will do something." Zacharias puts forward a proposal which is immediately accepted as a good solution. "Let us go to Zebedee's relatives. Joseph will certainly look for you there. If he should not come there, it will be quite easy for you to find someone who will accompany you to Galilee, because the fishermen from Gennesaret are continuously going to and coming from that house." They take the little donkey and go to Zebedee's relatives, who are the very same people with whom Joseph and Mary stayed 4 months before. The time passes quickly, but there is no sign of Joseph. Mary controls her grief, lulling the baby, but it is obvious that she is worried. Although it is so warm that everybody is perspiring, she has not taken off her mantle, concerned that she is to conceal her condition. At long last, Joseph is announced by a loud knocking at the door. Mary's face shines, cheerful again. Joseph greets her, because she is the first to go and meet him and greet him reverently. "The Lord's blessing on you, Mary, and on you, Joseph, and praised be the Lord that you have come. Here, Zacharias and Elizabeth were about to leave, to be at home before night. Your messenger arrived in Nazareth when I was at Cana, working there. I was told the other evening, and I left at once. But although I have travelled without stopping, I am late, because the donkey lost one of his shoes. Please forgive me." "I am to be forgiven by you, because I have been away from Nazareth for such a long time. But see, they were so happy to have me with them that I decided to please them up until now." "You have done well, woman. Where is the baby?" They enter the room where Elizabeth is giving suck to little John before departing. Joseph congratulates the parents on the sturdiness of the child, who screams and kicks as if they were thrashing him, because he has been taken away from his mother's breast to be shown to Joseph. They all laugh at his protests. Also, Zebedee's relatives, who have come in with fresh fruit, milk, and bread for everybody, and a large tray of fish, laugh and join in the conversation. Mary speaks very little. She is sitting quiet and silent in a little corner, with her hands on her lap under her mantle. Also, when she drinks a cup of milk and eats a bunch of golden grapes with a little bread, she speaks very little and hardly moves. Her looks at Joseph are a mixture of pain and inquiry. He also looks at her, and after some time, bending over her shoulder, he asks her, "Are you tired, or are you not well? You look pale and sad." "I am sorry I have to part from little John. I am very fond of him. I held him on my heart only a few minutes after he was born." Joseph does not ask any more questions. It is time for Zacharias to depart. The wagon stops at the door and they all go towards it. The two cousins embrace each other fondly. Mary kisses the baby many times before putting him in the lap of his mother, who is already sitting in the wagon. She then says goodbye to Zacharias and asks him to bless her. When kneeling before the priest, her mantle slips off her shoulders and a figure appears in the bright light of the summer afternoon. I do not know whether Joseph notices her figure at this moment, because he is intent on saying goodbye to Elizabeth. The wagon leaves. Joseph goes back into the house with Mary, who sits down again in the dim corner. "If you do not mind traveling by night, I would suggest we leave at sunset. It is very warm during the day. The night instead is cool and quiet. I am saying that for you, because I don't want you to get sunstroke. It makes no difference to me to be in the scorching sun, but you—" "As you wish, Joseph. I also think it is better to travel by night." The house has been all tidied up, and the little orchard. The flowers are beautiful, as you will see. You are arriving just in time to see them all in bloom. The apple tree, the fig tree, the vines are laden with fruit, as was never seen before, and I had to put a support for the pomegranate because its branches were so heavily laden with fruit already fully grown, a thing which has never been seen before at this time of the year. The olive tree, you will have plenty of oil. It blossomed in a miraculous way, and not one flower was lost. All the flowers are now little olives. When they are mature, the tree will seem full of dark pearls. There isn't another orchard as beautiful in whole of Nazareth. Also, your relatives are surprised. Alphaeus says it is a miracle. Your hands have worked it. Oh no, poor me. What can I have done? I took care of the trees and I gave some water to the flowers. Do you know, I built a fountain for you down at the end near the grotto, and I put a large basin there. So you will not have to go out to get water. I brought the water down from the spring which is above Matthew's olive grove. It is pure and plentiful. I brought a little stream down to you. I dug a small duct in the ground, I covered it properly, and now the water comes down, singing like a harp. I was not happy that you should go to the village fountain and then carry back home the jars full of water. Thank you, Joseph, you are so good. Joseph and Mary are now silent, as if they were tired, and Joseph is also dozing. Mary is praying. It is now evening. The host insists that they should eat something before leaving. Joseph, in fact, eats some bread and fish, while Mary takes only some milk and fruit. They then depart. They get on their donkeys. Joseph has fastened Mary's little trunk to his saddle, as he has done when coming to Jerusalem. And before she gets on her donkey, he makes sure that her saddle is properly fastened. I see that Joseph looks at Mary when she mounts her saddle, but he does not say anything. Their journey starts when the first stars begin to twinkle in the sky. They hurry to the town gates to reach them before they close. When they come out of Jerusalem and they take the main road toward Galilee, the clear sky is already crowded with stars. There is solemn quietness in the country. One can hear only a few nightingales singing, and the beating of the hooves of the two donkeys on the hard road, baked by the sun. Mary says, "It is the eve of Maundy Thursday. Some people may think that this vision is out of place, but your grief of lover of my Jesus crucified is in your heart and will remain there even if a sweet vision is shown to you. It is like the tepidity emanating from a flame, which is still fire, but is no longer fire. The flame is fire, not its tepidity which comes from it. No beatific or peaceful vision will be able to remove that grief from your heart and regard it as something precious, more precious than your own life, because it is the greatest gift that God can grant a believer in his Son. Further, my vision is not discordant in all its peace with the commemorations of this week. Also, my Joseph suffered his passion. It began in Jerusalem when he noticed my condition, and it lasted several days, exactly as it had happened to Jesus and to me. Neither was it less painful for his soul, and only because of the holiness of my just spouse, it was contained in such a dignified and secret form that it has been hardly noticed throughout centuries. Oh, our first passion! Who can feel its intimate and silent intensity? Who can describe my pain when I realized that heaven had not yet heard my prayer by revealing the mystery to Joseph? I understood that he was not aware of it when I saw that he was respectful to me as usual. If he had known that I bore in me the word of God, he would have adored that word enclosed in my womb, with the act of veneration which are due to God, and which he would not have failed to accomplish, as I would not have refused to receive, not for my own sake, but for him who was within me, and that I bore, as the ark of the alliance carried the stone cold and the vases of manna. Who can measure my struggle against the dismay that endeavored to overwhelm me in order to convince me that I had hoped in vain in the Lord? Oh, I think it was the furious rage of Satan. I perceived a doubt rising behind my back and stretching its icy claws to imprison my soul and preventing it from praying. Doubt is so dangerous and lethal to the spirit. It is lethal because it is the first agent of the deadly disease called despair, against which we must react with all our strength, so that our souls may not perish and we may not lose God. Who can truly tell Joseph's pain, his thoughts, the perturbation of his feelings? Like a little boat caught in a great storm, he was in a vortex of conflicting ideas, in a turmoil of reflections of which one was more piercing and painful than the other. He was, to all appearances, a man betrayed by his wife. He saw his good reputation and the esteem of this world collapse around him because of her. He saw scornful fingers pointed at himself and felt pitied by the village people. Above all, he perceived that his love and esteem for me had fallen, struck to death before the evidence of a deed. In this respect, his holiness shines brighter than mine. And I give this witness with the affection of a spouse, because I want you to love my Joseph, this wise, prudent, patient, and good man, who is not separated from the mystery of redemption. On the contrary, he is closely connected to it, because he suffered for it, consuming himself in sorrow for it, saving our Saviour at the cost of his own sacrifice, because of his holiness. Had he not been so holy, he would have acted in a human way, denouncing me as an adulteress, so that I should be stoned, and the son of my sin should perish with me. If he had been less holy, God would not have granted him his light as guidance in his trial. But Joseph was holy. His pure spirit lived in God. His charity was ardent and strong, and out of charity he saved your Saviour for you, both when he refrained from accusing me to the elders, and when he saved Jesus in Egypt, leaving everything with prompt obedience. The 3 days of Joseph's passion were short in number, but deep in intensity, and they were tremendous as also for me, those days of my first passion, because I was aware of his suffering, which I could not alleviate. In fact, I had to obey God's command, who had said to me, "Be silent." And when, after we arrived in Nazareth, I saw him go away with a laconic goodbye, and bent as if he had aged in a short time, and I noticed that he no longer came to see me in the evening as he used to do, then I tell you, my children, that my heart wept very bitterly. Closed in my house, all alone, in the house where everything reminded me of the Annunciation and the Incarnation, and where everything reminded me of Joseph, married to me with spotless virginity, I had to fight despair and Satan's insinuation, and hope, and pray, and forgive Joseph's suspicion, his disturbance, and just despair. My children, it is necessary to hope, to pray, to forgive, to obtain God's intervention in our favor. You must live your passions, because you deserved them with your sins. I can teach you how to overcome them and turn them into joy. Hope beyond measure. Pray with confidence. Forgive to be forgiven. God's forgiveness will be the peace you desire, my children. I will not say anything else for the time being. There will be silence until after the Easter triumph. It is Passion time. Have pity on your Redeemer. Listen to his cries and count his wounds and tears. The former were suffered, the latter shed for you. Let every other vision disappear before that one which reminds you of the redemption accomplished on your behalf. The Poem of the Man God, Volume 1, Chapter 26. Mary of Nazareth clarifies the matter with Joseph. 31st of May, 1944. After 53 days, Mother shows herself again in this vision, which she tells me to put in this book. Joy is renewed in me, because to see Mary is to possess joy. I see the little orchard in Nazareth. Mary is spinning in the shade of a very thick apple tree, overloaded with apples, which begin to redden and are so rosy and round that they look like so many cheeks of children. But Mary is not rosy at all. The beautiful colour that brightened her cheeks at Hebron has disappeared. Her face is as pale as ivory, only her lips are a curve of pale coral. Under her lowered eyelashes there are 2 dark shadows, and her eyes are swollen, as if she had cried. I cannot see her eyes, because her head is bowed, intent on her work, and even more on a thought which is obviously distressing her. In fact, I can hear her sighing like a person sad at heart. She is all dressed in white linen, because it is very warm, notwithstanding that the freshness, still intact, of the flowers makes me understand that it is morning. Her head is uncovered, and the sun playing among the apple tree leaves, which are stirred by a very gentle breeze, filters with its thin rays down to the dark brown earth of the flower beds, and forms small circles of light on her blonde head, so that her hair looks like pure gold. There is no noise whatsoever from the house or from the neighborhood. One can only hear the babbling of the tiny stream of water that runs down into the large basin at the bottom of the orchard. Mary starts at a loud, resolute knocking at the door. She lays the distaff and spindle down and rises to go and open. Although her dress is loose and wide, it does not conceal the rotundity of her pelvis. Joseph is standing in front of her. Mary turns pale, also in her lips. Her face is so bloodless that it looks like a ghost. Mary looks at Joseph with sad, inquiring eyes. Joseph looks at her with imploring ones. They are both silent, looking at each other. Then Mary says, "At this time, Joseph, is there anything you need? What do you want to tell me? Come in." Joseph enters and closes the door. He is still silent. "Speak, Joseph. What is it you want from me?" "I want you to forgive me." Joseph bends down as if he wanted to kneel down. But Mary, who is always so reserved in touching him, seizes him resolutely by his shoulders and stops him. Mary's face blushes and blanches in rapid succession. One moment it is all red, and immediately afterwards it's white as snow, as it was before. "You want me to forgive you? I have nothing to forgive you, Joseph. I can but thank you once again for everything you have done here while I was away, and for your love for me." Joseph looks at her, and I can see 2 large tears welling up in the cavity of his deep eyes. They remain there as if they were on the rim of a vase, and they then roll down onto his cheeks and his beard. "Forgive me, Mary. I mistrusted you. Now I know. I am not worthy of having such a treasure. I lacked in charity. I accused you in my heart. I accused you unfairly because I did not ask you to tell me the truth. I sinned against God's law because I did not love you as I loved myself." "Oh no, you have not sinned." "Yes, I have, Mary. If I had been accused of such a crime, I would have defended myself. But I was not giving you the possibility of defending yourself, because I was about to take a decision without questioning you. I have been unfair to you, because I offended you with my suspicion. Also, a single suspicion is an offense, Mary. Who suspects does not know, and I did not know you as I should have done. But for the torment I suffered, 3 days of torture, forgive me, Mary." "I have nothing for which to forgive you. On the contrary, I ask you to forgive me for the pain I caused you." "Oh yes, it was great pain. What a torture. Look, I was told this morning that my temples are white-haired and my face wrinkled. These past days have been more than 10 years of my life. But why, Mary, have you been so humble as to conceal your glory from me, your spouse, and thus allow me to suspect you?" Joseph is not on his knees, but he's bent so low that he's as good as kneeling down. And Mary lays a tiny hand on his head and smiles. She seems to be absolving him, and she whispers, "If I had not been humble in the most perfect manner, I would not have deserved to conceive the expected one who is coming to pay for the sin of pride that ruined man." And then I obeyed. God had requested such obedience. It cost me so much. Because of you, because of the pain that you were to suffer. But I could but obey. I am the handmaid of the Lord, and servants do not discuss the orders they receive. They fulfill them. Joseph, even if they cause bitter tears. Mary weeps quietly while speaking, so quietly that Joseph, bent down as he is, does not notice until a tear falls on the floor. He then lifts his head, and it is the first time I see him do this. He presses Mary's little hands in his dark, strong ones, and he kisses the tips of the rosy, slender fingers that protrude like fresh buds of a peach tree from the circle formed by his own hands. Now we shall have to arrange for. Joseph does not say anything else, but he looks at Mary's body, and she becomes purple and sits suddenly, to avoid her figure being exposed to the eyes watching her. We shall have to make haste. I will come here. We will complete the wedding next week. Is that all right? Whatever you do is all right, Joseph. You are the head of the family. I am your servant. No, I am your servant. I am the happy servant of my Lord, who is growing in your womb. You are blessed amongst all the women of Israel. This evening I will warn my relatives, and after, when I am here, we will work to prepare everything to receive. Oh, how can I receive God in my house, God in my arms? I will die of joy. I will never dare to touch him. I will never be able. You will be able, as I will, by the grace of God. But you are. I am a poor man, the poorest of God's children. Jesus is coming to us, poor people, to make us rich in God. He is coming to us too, because we are the poorest and we admit it. Rejoice, Joseph. The house of David has the king long waited for, and our home will be more splendid than Solomon's palace, because heaven will be here, and we shall share with God the secret of peace that men will be acquainted with later. He will grow among us. Our arms will be the cradle for the Redeemer, and our work will procure bread for him. Oh, Joseph, we will hear the voice of God calling us, Father and Mother. Oh, Mary cries with joy, such happy tears. And Joseph, who is now kneeling at her feet, is weeping with his head almost hidden in Mary's wide dress, which falls in folds onto the plain pavement of the room. The vision ends here. Mary says, "No one must interpret my Paula erroneously. It was not caused by human fear. From a human point of view, I should have expected to be stoned to death. But I was not afraid because of that. I was suffering because of Joseph's pain. Neither was I upset by the thought that he might accuse me. I was only sorry and afraid that he might be lacking in charity if he should insist in his accusation. That is why all my blood rushed to my heart when I saw him. It was the moment when even a just man might have offended justice by offending charity, and I would have been extremely upset if a just man were to commit an error, since he never erred. Had I not been humble to the very extreme limit, as I told Joseph, I would not have deserved to bear within me him who was lowering himself. God, to the humiliation of being a man, in order to make reparation for the pride of the human race. I have shown you that scene which is not described by any of the Gospels, because I want to draw the excessively misguided attention of men to the conditions which are essential to please God and receive his continuous calls to your hearts. Faith. Joseph believed the heavenly messenger's words unquestioningly. He wanted but to believe, because he was sincerely convinced that God is good and that since he had hoped in the Lord would not have reserved for him the torture of being betrayed, disappointed and sneered at by his neighbors. He asked for nothing but to believe in me, because being honest, it was painful for him to think that other people were not honest. He lived according to the law, and the law says, love your neighbor as yourself. We love ourselves so much that we think we are perfect even when we are not. Can we therefore not love our neighbor simply because we think he's faulty? Unrestricted charity. A charity that knows how to forgive, that wants to forgive, and forgive in advance, excusing wholeheartedly the imperfections of our neighbors. It is necessary to forgive immediately, accepting every extenuating circumstance. Humility as unrestricted as charity. You must admit that you can be faulty even in simple thoughts, and you must not be so proud as to refuse to say, I made a mistake, because such pride would be more harmful than the previous fault. Everybody makes mistakes, with the exception of God. Who can say, I am never wrong? And there is a more difficult humility, the one that knows how to keep silent about God's wonderful things in us, when it is not necessary to proclaim them for his glory, so that we might not discourage our neighbor who has not received such special gifts from God. If he wants, oh, if he wants only, God reveals himself in his servants. Elizabeth saw me for what I was. My spouse knew me for what I was, when it was time for him to know. Leave to the Lord the care of proclaiming you his servants. He is anxious to do so, because every creature that rises to a particular mission is a new glory which is added to his infinite glory, and is a witness of what man is, as God wanted him to be, a lesser perfection that reflects its author. Remain in shadow and silence, you who are beloved by grace, so that you may hear the only words of life that you may deserve to have on you and in you, the sun that shines eternally. O most blessed light, God, joy of your servants, do shine on those servants of yours, that they may exult in their humility, praising you, only you. Because you disperse the proud, but raise the humble who love you to the splendor of your kingdom.